Noah Beasley was a 19-year-old with a shy and quiet personality. Born and raised in the small town of Cottonwood, Arizona, Noah had just graduated from high school in May 2021, where he was known as the shy kid who always carried a guitar on his back. While many of his classmates were preparing for college or starting jobs, Noah was still trying to figure out what he wanted to do with his life. He had a passion for music and dreamed of becoming a musician one day, but he hadn't yet decided how to make that dream come true. Noah lived with his mother, Jenna Beasley, in a modest trailer on the outskirts of town. Their financial situation was tough. Jenna was a single mother who had struggled to make ends meet for most of Noah's life, especially after losing her job due to the economic downturn caused by the pandemic. The stress of their financial difficulties weighed heavily on Noah. He often felt responsible for helping his mother, who was deeply in debt. Despite his quiet nature, Noah had a kind heart. He was the type of person who would go out of his way to help others, even when he was struggling himself. In the days leading up to his death, Noah was in a strange situation. Just a week earlier, he had married Gertrude "Gertie" Hartford, a 65-year-old retired heiress. Gertie was known for her extravagant lifestyle and had been married several times before. She insisted on a grand wedding, which took place at a luxury resort in nearby Sedona. The wedding was over the top, with expensive decorations, a gourmet menu, and a designer wedding dress that Gertie had specially made. Her groom, Noah, however, seemed out of place at the event. He appeared nervous and unsure about the whole situation. The sudden announcement of his marriage to 65-year-old Gertrude Hartford came as a shock to everyone who knew him. Many wondered what could have led the gentle, introverted Noah to make such a drastic decision. Some speculated it was connected to his mother's financial struggles, while others feared he was being manipulated. Noah's relationship with Gertie wasn't just unusual because of their age difference. Gertie was a demanding and controlling person. She often threw tantrums when things didn't go her way, and Noah found himself increasingly overwhelmed by her behavior. He confided in his mother about his doubts and fears, but Jenna encouraged him to stay in the marriage. As a result, Noah felt trapped, torn between his mother's wishes and his growing discomfort with his new life. At the time of his death, Noah was still trying to navigate his new reality. He had withdrawn from his friends and spent most of his time in his new home with Gertie. His dream of becoming a musician seemed further away than ever. He was a young man who had lost his way, unable to see a future that made sense to him. On the morning of October 8, 2021, the peaceful town of Sedona was shaken by a grim discovery. At 8:30 a.m., Marjorie Lane, an 82-year-old neighbor, was out for her daily walk when she noticed something unusual at the luxurious home of Gertrude Hartford Beasley. The curtains were drawn, and the front door was slightly ajar. Marjorie, who had lived in the neighborhood for over 30 years, found this odd, especially since Gertrude was known for her strict routine and usually had everything in perfect order. Curious and concerned, Marjorie decided to check on the house. As she approached, she called out, but there was no answer. Hesitant, she stepped inside and immediately noticed a strong, bitter smell. It was then that she saw Noah Beasley lying motionless on the living room floor. His body was slumped against the couch, and scattered around him were several empty pill bottles, all prescription medications. A half-empty glass of water sat on the coffee table beside him. Marjorie was frozen in shock, her heart racing. She had known Noah and couldn't believe what she was seeing. Fighting back tears, she quickly pulled out her phone and dialed 911, her hands trembling as she gave the operator the address and explained what she had found. When the 911 operator asked her to check for signs of life, Marjorie hesitated but did as she was told. She knelt beside Noah and gently shook his shoulder, calling his name. There was no response. She could see that his face was pale, his lips slightly blue, and his breathing had stopped. Marjorie's mind was racing. She recalled the wedding just a week before, where Noah had looked so out of place, standing beside the much older Gertrude in her extravagant wedding gown. She couldn't understand how things had gone so wrong so quickly. With tears streaming down her face, she stayed on the phone with the 911 operator until the police and paramedics arrived. The authorities quickly declared Noah dead at the scene. Marjorie, shaken and devastated, was escorted outside, where she sat on the curb, staring blankly at the house where Noah's young life had tragically ended. The police arrived at the Hartford Beasley residence just before 9:00 a.m. on October 8, 2021. Leading the investigation was Detective Marla Grunbold, a seasoned investigator with the Sedona Police Department. Known for her sharp instincts and no-nonsense attitude, Detective Grunwald wasted no time in assessing the scene. Accompanied by Officer Tom Jenkins, a young but eager recruit, they entered the home that had now become the center of a tragic mystery. The living room, where Noah's body was found, was eerily quiet. The luxurious furniture and tasteful decor contrasted starkly with the lifeless figure on the floor. Detective Grunwald immediately noticed the empty pill bottles scattered around Noah and the glass of water on the coffee table. She took note of the labels, prescriptions for medications like Xanax and Oxycontin, drugs often associated with overdose cases. The scene itself was surprisingly clean. No signs of struggle, no overturned furniture, no blood. It was almost too clean, which raised red flags for Detective Grunwald. The neatness suggested that whatever had happened, it wasn't the result of a sudden, chaotic event, but something more calculated. Detective Grunwald directed Officer Jenkins to begin photographing the scene while she called in a forensics team to dust for fingerprints and gather evidence. The coroner, Dr. Evelyn Ong, arrived shortly after to examine the body. She confirmed that Noah had likely died from an overdose, but the amount of drugs present, far beyond the recommended limit, made it clear that this was no accident. As they continued their investigation, Detective Grunwald's eyes were drawn to a small detail, a wedding photo of Noah and Gertrude on the mantel. In the photo, Noah's expression was distant, his eyes downcast, a stark contrast to Gertrude's beaming smile. It was a subtle but telling sign that all was not well in this newlywed household. The forensics team carefully collected the pill bottles, the glass of water, and any other potential evidence. They also noted a faint smell of perfume in the air, a scent Detective Grunwald recognized as something Gertrude was known for, a signature fragrance from an upscale brand, Channel Number 5. By the time they finished, Detective Grunwald had a growing sense that this was more than just an overdose. The evidence pointed to foul play, and the investigation was only just beginning. As the investigation into Noah Beasley's death deepened, the police turned their attention to the most obvious suspect, Gertrude "Gertie" Hartford Beasley, Noah's 65-year-old wife. Gertie was a well-known figure in Sedona, infamous for her extravagant lifestyle and commanding personality. Born into wealth, Gertie had been married multiple times, each union ending in a bitter divorce. Gertie was obsessed with staying youthful and was legendary for her tantrums when things didn't go her way. Her reputation as a Bridezilla was well-earned, as she demanded nothing but perfection from everyone around her. When Detective Marla Grunwald and Officer Tom Jenkins arrived at Gertie's home later that afternoon, they found her lounging by the pool, just a few feet from where her husband died, sipping on a mimosa and flipping through the latest issue of Vogue. Despite the tragic circumstances, Gertie seemed unnervingly calm. Dressed in a designer kaftan and oversized sunglasses, she exuded an air of indifference that immediately caught Detective Grunwald's attention. Gertie greeted the officers with a smile, but it didn't reach her eyes. When asked about the events leading up to Noah's death, she explained that she had gone to bed early the night before, leaving Noah in the living room to play his, quote, computer games. She claimed that when she woke up that morning and didn't see him in bed, she assumed he had slept on the couch. She expressed surprise and some sadness upon hearing of his death, but didn't seem particularly distraught, as if she had heard a friend's vet had passed away. During the interrogation, Gertie's story remained consistent, but her lack of emotion raised suspicions. She was cooperative but distant, answering questions with rehearsed precision. When asked about the pill bottles found at the scene, Gertie stated that Noah had been struggling recently and had been prescribed medication to help him cope. She insisted that she had no idea he might overdose and suggested that perhaps Noah had taken more pills than he should have in a moment of despair. Despite her calm demeanor, Detective Grunwald noted a few inconsistencies in Gertie's story. For one, Gertie had mentioned that Noah was playing video games, but the TV was off when Marjorie Lane discovered the body. Additionally, the bed in the master bedroom was untouched, suggesting that Gertie may not have gone to bed at all. The more Detective Grunwald pressed, the more it became clear that Gertie was hiding something. However, without concrete evidence, the police couldn't hold her. Gertie's alibi seemed airtight, but her behavior left a lingering sense of doubt. As the interrogation concluded, Detective Grunwald couldn't shake the feeling that this glamorous, poised woman was more involved in Noah's death than she let on. With Gertrude Hartford Beasley remaining a person of interest, the police turned their attention to the second suspect, Jenna Beasley, Noah's mother. Jenna, 49, was a woman who had faced more than her share of hardships. Her life had been a series of bad decisions, each one seemingly worse than the last. Struggling with crushing debt, Jenna had resorted to selling prescription drugs under the table, a secret she had managed to keep hidden from most, but not all, having been arrested several times. Detective Marla Grunwald knew that Jenna's desperation might have driven her to push Noah into his ill-fated marriage with Gertrude. After all, the union offered Jenna a lifeline out of her financial woes. The idea that her son's marriage could secure her future was too tempting to resist. But what cost? When the police brought Jenna in for questioning, she appeared frazzled and nervous. Dressed in faded jeans and a worn t-shirt, she was a stark contrast to the polished image of Gertrude. Jenna's hands shook as she lit a cigarette, a habit she had picked up again in recent months, and her voice wavered as she answered the detective's questions. Jenna admitted that she had encouraged Noah to marry Gertrude, painting it as an opportunity he couldn't pass up. She spoke of the wedding, held at a lavish Sedona resort, where Noah had seemed out of place amidst the opulence. Jenna claimed she had wanted the best for her son, that she believed Gertrude could provide him and her with money, something she had never been able to provide. However, when the conversation shifted to the drugs found at the scene, Jenna became defensive. She denied knowing anything about the massive amount of pills, insisting that Noah must have taken them himself and gotten it from someplace else. But Detective Grunwald wasn't convinced. Jenna's financial struggles, her involvement in illegal drug sales, and her desperation to secure her future all pointed to her involvement. Under pressure, Jenna's responses became more erratic. She began to contradict herself, at one point claiming she hadn't seen Noah in days, then later stating she had visited him the night before his death. Her nervousness and inconsistent statements only deepened the police's suspicions. Despite her denials, Jenna's connection to the drugs and her clear motive to ensure Noah's marriage worked made her a prime suspect. Detective Grunwald knew Jenna was cunning, ruthless, and would do anything to protect herself, even at the expense of her own son. As the interrogation ended, they were closer to unraveling the truth, but more pieces of the puzzle were still missing. With both Gertrude Hartford Beasley and Jenna Beasley under scrutiny, the police turned their attention to a third suspect. Harry Hartford, Gertrude's ex-husband. At 70 years old, Harry was a wealthy real estate mogul with a reputation for being ruthless in both business and his personal life. His most recent venture involved developing retirement communities across Arizona, a lucrative business that had only expanded his empire. Harry's relationship with Gertrude had ended in a bitter divorce just a few months before she married Noah. The divorce had been a public spectacle, gossiped about in Arizona's highest social circles. Gertrude had walked away with a sizable portion of Harry's wealth, leaving him angry and humiliated. The timing of Noah's marriage to Gertrude, a much younger boy toy, had added insult to injury. Harry's jealousy and lingering resentment made him a prime suspect in the investigation. Detective Marla Grunwald and Officer Tom Jenkins decided to bring Harry in for questioning. When they arrived at his sprawling estate, they found him in his home office, surrounded by legal documents and architectural blueprints. Harry greeted them with a firm handshake, his demeanor confident and controlled. Unlike Jenna, who had been nervous and agitated, Harry was calm and collected, almost as if he had been expecting their visit. During the interrogation, Harry was cooperative, but his answers were carefully measured. He admitted that he was angry about Gertrude's new marriage, describing it as a slap in my bleeping face. However, he denied any involvement in Noah's death. Harry explained that he had been busy with his business and had little contact with Gertrude or Noah since the divorce. When asked about his whereabouts on the night of Noah's death, Harry provided a solid alibi. He claimed he had been at a business dinner in Phoenix, meeting with potential investors. Several high-profile attendees could vouch for his presence, making it difficult for the police to challenge his alibi. Despite his cooperation, Detective Grunwald couldn't shake the feeling that Harry was hiding something. His calmness seemed almost too practiced, as if he had rehearsed his responses. The fact that he had been seen arguing with Gertrude just days before Noah's death only added to the suspicion. Witnesses had reported a heated exchange between the two at a local country club, where Harry had reportedly told Gertrude she would regret their divorce. While the police didn't have enough evidence to arrest Harry, his possible motive, jealousy and revenge, kept him firmly in their sights. The investigation was far from over, and Detective Grunwald knew they had to dig deeper to uncover the truth. On October 15, 2021, just as the investigation seemed to be stalling, a critical piece of new evidence emerged. It was a cool, sunny afternoon, with clouds beginning to form over Sedona. Detective Marla Grunwald was at the station, reviewing the case files once again, when Officer Tom Jenkins rushed in, holding a sealed envelope. It had been delivered anonymously to the station that morning, raising immediate suspicion. Inside the envelope was a USB drive. The contents of the drive were shocking. A series of text messages between Gertrude Hartford Beasley and an unknown contact, dated just days before Noah's death. The messages detailed a plan Gertrude had been hatching to divorce Noah and cut him out of her will, using her knowledge of Jenna Beasley's illegal drug dealings as legal leverage. The messages were laced with Gertrude's frustration over Noah's sullen attitude and lackluster sexual performance as her husband, and her growing impatience to rid herself of him. "Sex with him is so vanilla," one message read. "His bleep is smaller than my ring finger." Another chilling text stated, "If that bleep Jenna thinks she's getting away with this bleep, she's got another thing coming. I'll make sure she and that small bleep pay." The messages provided crucial insight into Gertrude's mindset and her intentions. It became clear that she had been orchestrating a plan to eliminate both Noah and Jenna from her life. But the messages also hinted at the involvement of a third party, someone who was helping Gertrude gather information on Jenna's prescription drug dealing. Detective Grunwald and her team immediately began tracing the origins of the messages. They discovered that the anonymous contact was, in fact, one of Gertrude's private investigators, someone she had hired to dig up dirt on Jenna in the days before she married Noah. This investigator had uncovered Jenna's drug dealing record and was feeding Gertrude the information she needed to execute her plan. The new evidence painted a damning picture of Gertrude as a manipulative and vengeful woman, willing to go through any lengths to get what she wanted. It also raised serious questions about Jenna's role in Noah's death. Had Jenna learned of Gertrude's plan and acted out of desperation, or was she merely a pawn in Gertrude's twisted game? With this fresh evidence in hand, the police intensified their focus on both Gertrude and Jenna. The investigation took on a new urgency as it became clear that the truth was far more complex than anyone had initially suspected. The pieces were starting to fall into place, but the full story had yet to be revealed. On October 20, 2021, as the investigation neared its breaking point, Detective Marla Grunwald received a breakthrough. After analyzing the text messages found on the USB drive and cross-referencing them with phone records, it became clear that Jenna Beasley, Noah's own mother, was behind the deadly plot. Jenna had been using her son as a sexual pawn, driven by desperation and greed. The police now had enough evidence to arrest her. Jenna Beasley, 49, was a woman who saw life as a constant struggle. Crushed by debt and haunted by poor life choices, Jenna saw Noah's marriage to Gertrude as her ticket out of financial ruin. She was terrified that Noah, who was not known to be sexually interested in women, would leave Gertrude, shattering Jenna's hopes for a steady supply of cash. To ensure that wouldn't happen, Jenna had been secretly feeding Noah prescription drugs and sexual enhancers to keep him compliant and performing sexually. But her plan went terribly wrong when Noah accidentally overdosed, taking far more than she had intended. The twist came when it was revealed that Gertrude, unsatisfied with Noah's lack of sexual enthusiasm as a husband, had been planning to divorce him and cut both him and Jenna out of her life. She had discovered Jenna's drug dealings and intended to use that information to keep them out of her money. But Jenna, desperate to keep the marriage intact, took matters into her own hands. On the night of Noah's death, Jenna had given him a stronger dose of the drugs, hoping to calm him down. But Noah, distraught over his loveless marriage and fearful of Gertrude's viciousness, took even more pills on his own, leading to a fatal overdose. Jenna hadn't meant to kill her son, but her actions directly caused his death. When the police confronted Jenna with the evidence, she initially denied everything. Her demeanor was panicked and frantic, a stark contrast to her earlier calm. But as Detective Grunwald laid out the damning messages and phone records, Jenna's defenses crumbled. Jenna claimed she never intended to kill her son, only to keep him in the marriage until they could secure their financial future. Jenna's arrest sent shockwaves through the small towns of Sedona and Cottonwood. Noah's family was devastated by the revelation that his own mother had caused his death. The community, already shaken by the bizarre circumstances of the marriage, was now grappling with the tragic reality that greed and desperation had led to such a senseless loss. As Jenna was led away in handcuffs, she appeared numb, unable to fully grasp the gravity of her actions. The Beasley family, overwhelmed by grief, expressed their sorrow and disbelief, struggling to come to terms with what had happened. The arrest marked the end of a dark chapter in Sodoma's history, but the pain and shock would linger for a long time. Jenna Beasley's trial began in early December 2022. The courtroom was packed with reporters from outlets like the Arizona Republic and True Crime Weekly, eager to cover the shocking details of the case. The prosecution, led by Assistant District Attorney Mark Christensen, 42, painted Jenna as a manipulative and desperate woman who had placed her own financial needs above the life of her son. Christensen, known for his sharp intellect and relentless pursuit of justice, argued that Jenna's actions were premeditated and driven by greed. He pointed to the text messages, phone records, and Jenna's own confession as irrefutable evidence of her guilt. The defense, headed by public defender Carlita Vasquez, 28, countered by portraying Jenna as a troubled mother who had made a terrible mistake. Vasquez, a seasoned attorney with a reputation for compassion, argued that Jenna never intended to kill Noah. She emphasized Jenna's financial struggles or desperation to secure a better future for her family, and the fact that Noah's death was accidental. Vasquez appealed to the jury's sympathy, asking them to consider Jenna's difficult circumstances and the pressure she was under. Throughout the trial, Noah's family watched in agony. His mother's actions had torn their family apart, and the pain was evident in their tearful expressions. The prosecution's case was strong, but the defense's argument for leniency struck a chord with some jurors. On December 15, 2022, the jury delivered their verdict. Jenna Beasley was found guilty of involuntary manslaughter. The jury believed that while Jenna's actions had caused Noah's death, there was not enough evidence to prove that she had intended to kill him. The courtroom was silent as the verdict was read, with Jenna showing little reaction, her face pale and expressionless. The judge sentenced Jenna to 10 years in prison, with the possibility of parole after 5 years. The sentence was met with mixed reactions. Some felt it was too lenient, given the tragic loss of Noah's life, while others believed it was fair, considering Jenna's desperate circumstances. For Noah's family, the verdict brought little comfort. They were left to grapple with the reality that their loved one was gone, taken by the very person who was supposed to protect him. The town of Sedona, too, was left to process the disturbing events that had unfolded in their midst, a stark reminder of how greed and desperation can lead to unthinkable actions. In the months following Jenna Beasley's sentencing, the impact of the case continued to resonate deeply within the Sedona community. Betrayal had left a lasting mark on everyone involved, from the Beasley family to local residents. Jenna Beasley was sent to the Arizona State Prison Complex in Perryville, a high-security facility located near Phoenix. In prison, Jenna faced a challenging environment. Her case had received significant media attention, and she was often the subject of gossip and judgment from fellow inmates. The prison system offered her limited opportunities for rehabilitation and support, leaving her to reflect on the tragic consequences of her actions. Jenna spent her time participating in prison programs aimed at addressing substance abuse and mental health issues, hoping to find some sense of redemption and prepare for her eventual release. Despite the turmoil, life in Sedona gradually returned to normal. The town held a memorial for Noah at a local park, attended by friends, family, and residents who wished to honor his memory. The event featured live music and speeches celebrating Noah's life and dreams. It was a somber reminder of the young man whose life was cut short, and it offered the community a chance to come together and support one another. As for the media, coverage of the case eventually faded, making way for new stories and developments. However, the impact of Noah's death and the subsequent trial continued to serve as a poignant reminder of the consequences of desperation and greed, affecting everyone who had been touched by the tragic events of October 2021. Daniel "Danny" Miller, a 45-year-old high school history teacher, was known for his engaging storytelling and unwavering dedication to his students. Residing in Springfield, Missouri, Daniel led a seemingly ordinary life. Beyond his profession, he found solace in his passion for gardening and cherished his role as a devoted father to his 2 children. His amicable nature endeared him to the community, but beneath the surface, rumors swirled about his wife's infidelities, casting a shadow over his personal life. In October 2009, the town of Springfield was abuzz with excitement as the annual Harvest Festival drew near. The streets were adorned with colorful leaves, and the crisp autumn air carried the scent of pumpkin spice. Families flocked to the local pumpkin patch to pick the perfect pumpkins for carving, while children eagerly awaited the haunted hayrides and corn mazes. Daniel Miller, being an avid gardener, was particularly fond of this time of year. He would spend his weekends tending to his lush backyard garden, carefully tilling the soil and nurturing his vibrant collection of flowers and vegetables. His garden was a sanctuary, a place where he could escape the stress of his teaching job and find solace in nature's beauty. Despite his seemingly idyllic life, whispers of trouble had begun to circulate through the town. It was rumored that Daniel's wife, Linda, had been seen in the company of other men. Gossip spread like wildfire, fueled by the small-town grapevine and the insatiable hunger for scandalous tales, and Linda soon became known as the town harlot. As the days grew shorter and the nights grew colder, tensions mounted within the Miller household. The once happy couple found themselves entangled in a web of suspicion and mistrust. Friends and neighbors noticed the strain in their relationship, but no one could have predicted the tragic turn of events that would soon unfold. In the quiet town of Springfield, Missouri, a shocking event unfolded that would send ripples through the community. On the fateful day of October 28, 2009, the sun began to set, casting an eerie glow over the neighborhood. The air was heavy with anticipation, as if the universe itself sensed something was amiss. It was Linda Miller, wife of the beloved high school history teacher Daniel Miller, who made the chilling discovery. As she entered their home, a sense of unease settled upon her. Little did she know that her life was about to be forever changed. Linda's footsteps echoed through the hallway as she made her way towards the bathroom. The door creaked open, revealing a sight that would haunt her dreams for years to come. There, sitting on the toilet, was the lifeless body of her husband, Daniel. A gasp escaped Linda's lips as she stumbled backward, her heart pounding in her chest. She couldn't believe what she was seeing. How could this happen? Questions flooded her mind, but the answers remained elusive. The room was frozen in time, as if the walls themselves held their breath. The silence was deafening, broken only by Linda's anguished sobs. She reached for her phone, trembling fingers dialing the emergency number. The authorities needed to be notified, and quickly. As Linda waited for help to arrive, her mind raced with memories of happier times. She recalled Daniel's infectious laughter and his dedication to his students. How could someone so full of life meet such a tragic end? News of Daniel Miller's death spread like wildfire throughout the town. The local media buzzed with speculation, eager to uncover the truth behind this mysterious incident. Reporters from the Springfield Gazette and the Evening News arrived at the scene, cameras flashing and microphones poised. Detectives from the Springfield Police Department meticulously combed through the bathroom for any clues that could shed light on what had transpired. The room was meticulously analyzed, from the toothpaste brand on the sink to the magazines scattered on the floor. Every detail mattered in their quest for justice. As the investigation unfolded, the town of Springfield held its breath, anxiously awaiting answers. Who would want to harm Daniel Miller, a man loved and respected by all? And what secrets lay hidden beneath the surface of this seemingly idyllic community? The police officers arrived at the scene with a sense of urgency, ready to uncover the truth behind the untimely demise of Daniel Miller. Leading the investigation was Detective Huey "Ducky" Hughes, a seasoned investigator known for his sharp instincts and attention to detail. Together with his team, they meticulously combed through the crime scene, leaving no stone unturned in their quest for justice. As they entered the bathroom, the officers were met with a chilling sight. The room, once a place of privacy and solace, had been transformed into a macabre scene of death. Bloodstains and a copious amount of blood stained the toilet, indicating violent, bloody, and ultimately fatal diarrhea, a stark contrast to the otherwise pristine surroundings. The officers carefully documented each bloodstain, taking photographs and making detailed notes, ensuring that no piece of evidence went unnoticed. The weapon used in this heinous crime was a lethal dose of antifreeze, cunningly mixed into Daniel's favorite evening drink, sweet iced tea. The investigators found the empty bottle of antifreeze in the kitchen, discarded among other household cleaning supplies. They meticulously collected fingerprints and DNA samples from the bottle, hoping to find a match that would lead them to the perpetrator. As they continued their search for clues, the investigators discovered a torn piece of paper on the bathroom floor. It appeared to be a note, but the words were barely legible. With the help of forensic experts, They carefully pieced together the torn fragments, revealing a cryptic message. The note mentioned a meeting with a divorce lawyer, scheduled for the day of the crime. This discovery sparked a new lead, and the investigators wasted no time in following it up. The investigation into the murder of Daniel Miller was a complex puzzle, with each piece of evidence leading the detectives closer to the truth. The meticulousness and determination of Detective Huey "Ducky" Hughes and his team would prove crucial in solving this chilling crime. In the small town of Springfield, Missouri, back in October of 2009, a shocking crime took place that left the community in disbelief. The victim, Daniel Miller, was a well-liked high school history teacher known for his captivating storytelling and dedication to his students. But behind the facade of a seemingly ordinary life, dark secrets lurked, and it was his wife, Linda Miller, who found herself at the center of the investigation. Linda, a 42-year-old ambitious real estate agent, had always been known for her charm and persuasive skills. Her career had taken off, but unfortunately, her commitment to her family had suffered as a result. Tensions had been building in the Miller household, exacerbated by Linda's habit of serving microwave meals that Daniel despised. The couple's relationship had already been strained by rumors of Linda's extramarital affairs, which had spread like wildfire through the tight-knit community. During the investigation, Linda dropped a bombshell revelation that sent shockwaves through the town. She claimed that Daniel had been having sex with his best friend, Tom Richards. This revelation added another layer of complexity to the case, leaving the police puzzled and questioning the depths of Linda's involvement. The police interrogated Linda, observing her every move and change in demeanor. At times, she appeared angry, lashing out at the investigators with frustration. Other times, she seemed calm and composed, as if she had nothing to hide. But there was something else, an underlying emotion that flickered in her eyes, leaving the investigators curious about what secrets she might be concealing. The media frenzy surrounding the case grew, with local newspapers and television stations covering every twist and turn. The town of Springfield, usually known for its blandly peaceful atmosphere, was now gripped by fear and suspicion. People whispered in hushed tones, speculating about who could be responsible for such a heinous act. As the days turned into weeks, the town of Springfield held its breath, waiting for answers. The investigation into the murder of Daniel Miller had taken a dramatic turn, and the focus now shifted to Linda Miller, the woman at the center of it all. Tom Richards, a 55-year-old mechanic with a rugged and charismatic demeanor, became the next person of interest in the investigation into the tragic demise of Daniel "Danny" Miller. As Daniel's best friend, Tom's connection to the victim raised eyebrows and suspicions among the investigators. The police delved into Tom's background, meticulously examining his every move and interaction with Daniel and Linda Miller. Tom vehemently denied any sexual involvement with Daniel, but he did admit to a tumultuous relationship with the victim. The detectives focused on the moments leading up to Daniel's death, searching for any clues that could shed light on the truth. They delved into their friendship, peeling back the layers of their bond to uncover any hidden tensions or unresolved conflicts. During the investigation, Tom's reactions ranged from anger to calmness, leaving the detectives perplexed. They carefully observed his every word and gesture, searching for any signs of guilt or deception. The investigators knew that the truth often lurked in the unspoken secrets and hidden emotions that lay beneath the surface. As the detectives dug deeper, they discovered that Tom and Linda Miller had a history of confrontations. These incidents added fuel to the fire of suspicion surrounding Tom. The investigators wondered if these conflicts had escalated to a point where Tom would seek revenge against his best friend, or if Linda was trying to blackmail her enemy. The police also explored Tom's alibi for the time of Daniel's death. They meticulously pieced together his movements, cross-referencing them with witness testimonies and surveillance footage from local establishments. The investigators left no stone unturned, determined to uncover the truth behind Daniel's tragic demise. As the investigation into Tom Richards continued, the detectives found themselves entangled in a web of secrets and lies. They knew that the truth was out there, waiting to be unraveled. But would they be able to piece together the puzzle and bring justice to Daniel Miller? In the midst of the investigation into the tragic demise of Daniel "Danny" Miller, the police made a crucial breakthrough. It was a cold, early November day, when snow, early for the season, began to fall, adding to the tension that gripped the investigators and the community. The discovery of this new evidence found hidden in the woods outside Springfield offered a glimmer of hope in uncovering the truth behind the heinous crime. The police painstakingly analyzed the newfound piece of the puzzle, an abandoned hard drive, leaving no stone unturned. They meticulously combed through the evidence, extracting vital information that would propel the investigation forward. The details were shocking and disturbing, shedding light on a dark secret that had been lurking beneath the surface. The evidence revealed that someone had been sexually targeting Danny's class, engaging in sexual activities with over half of the students, both male and female. The sexual encounters took place both inside and outside the school premises, exposing a dark underbelly that had remained hidden from the community's gaze. This revelation sent shockwaves through the community and raised alarming questions about the safety and well-being of the students. The police immediately reached out to the school authorities, who cooperated fully in the investigation. News of the shocking revelations spread like wildfire throughout Springfield, leaving parents and community members in a state of disbelief. The local media, including the Springfield Gazette and the town's radio station, dedicated extensive coverage to the case, urging anyone with information to come forward. The town was gripped with fear and anger, as parents grappled with the unsettling realization that their children had been involved in such salacious acts. As the investigation delved deeper into this disturbing aspect of the case, the police vowed to bring the predator to justice and ensure the safety of the students. They worked tirelessly, aiming to unravel the web of secrets and uncover the identity of the predator who had tarnished the purity of Springfield's teens. In the ongoing investigation into the tragic death of Daniel Miller, a high school history teacher from Springfield, Missouri, the police turned their attention to a surprising new suspect. Laura Day Davis, a senior student known for her empathy and leadership skills, became a person of interest in this puzzling case. Laura, a young woman on the cusp of adulthood, had been an active participant in Daniel's history class, where she displayed a deep admiration for her teacher. However, as the investigation unfolded, shocking revelations came to light about Laura's connection to Linda Miller, Daniel's wife. It appeared that Laura had been involved in a sexual relationship with Linda, a fact that had remained hidden from the community until now. This revelation has raised eyebrows and led investigators to question whether Laura's feelings of jealousy and revenge could have played a role in Daniel's untimely demise. During the police interrogation, Laura's emotions fluctuated, revealing a complex mix of anger, calmness, and something else entirely. The investigators carefully observed her every word and gesture, searching for clues that could shed light on her involvement in this tragic event. As the investigation deepened, it became apparent that Linda Miller had been sexually involved with numerous students in Danny's class, both male and female, in what appeared to be a vengeful act against her husband's perceived infidelity with Tom Richards, Daniel's best friend. This tangled web of relationships and secrets left investigators grappling with the true motives behind Daniel's murder. In November of 2009, the small community of Springfield was gripped by the shocking revelations surrounding the investigation. News outlets, such as the local newspaper the Springfield Gazette, covered the story extensively, leaving residents astounded by the depth of deceit and betrayal that had unfolded within their midst. In November of 2009, the investigation into the brutal murder of Daniel Miller took a shocking turn. The diligent work of the police led them to uncover the true mastermind behind this heinous crime. It was none other than Linda Miller, the wife of the victim. Linda, a 42-year-old ambitious real estate agent, had carefully orchestrated this sinister plot. Motivated by a desire for complete control over their assets and the freedom to continue her illicit relationships, Linda saw Daniel as an obstacle to her happiness and financial independence. She had meticulously planned every detail, ensuring that her involvement remained hidden from prying eyes. With the evidence mounting against her, the police had no choice but to apprehend Linda. On that fateful day, the authorities descended upon her, just as the sun began to set over their quiet suburban neighborhood. The scene was reminiscent of a dramatic movie, with police cars lining the streets and flashing lights illuminating the darkening sky. As Linda was escorted out of her home, the media swarmed around, hungry for the details of this shocking revelation. News cameras captured the moment, broadcasting it to households across the city. Headlines blared with the news of a wife's betrayal and a husband's tragic demise, capturing the attention of a captivated audience. The arrest itself was not without its own drama. Linda's emotions were a whirlwind, as she displayed a range of reactions. Her face, once composed and confident, now contorted with a mix of anger, fear, and disbelief. The media captured every fleeting expression, ensuring that the world witnessed the downfall of a woman who had once seemed so charming and successful. As Linda was led away, the police were left to ponder the depths of her involvement. The investigation had uncovered a web of lies, deceit, and betrayal, leaving the community shaken to its core. The small town of Springfield, Missouri, would forever be marked by this tragic event. In November of 2009, the courtroom became the center stage for justice as the trial of Linda Miller, the accused murderer of Daniel Miller, unfolded. The trial was a gripping spectacle that captivated the nation's attention. People from all walks of life tuned in to watch the proceedings, eager to see if justice would prevail. The prosecution, led by seasoned lawyer J. Roy, meticulously presented their case against Linda. They called numerous witnesses, including detectives, forensic experts, and even Daniel's close friends, who testified about Linda's troubled marriage and her alleged extramarital affairs. The evidence against Linda was overwhelming, with the prosecution unveiling phone records, emails, and even surveillance footage that painted a damning picture of her involvement in the crime. On the other side of the courtroom, defense attorney Sarah Claxon Roberts fought fiercely to protect her client's interests. She argued that the evidence presented by the prosecution was circumstantial and failed to prove Linda's guilt beyond a reasonable doubt. Claxon Roberts attempted to cast doubt on the credibility of the witnesses and questioned the validity of the forensic evidence. The trial lasted for several weeks, with both sides presenting their closing arguments to the jury. The tension in the courtroom was palpable as the jurors deliberated over Linda's fate. After hours of careful consideration, the jury reached a unanimous verdict. Linda Miller was found guilty of first-degree murder. The courtroom erupted in a mix of emotions: relief for Daniel's family and friends, and shock for Linda and her supporters. The judge, known for his no-nonsense approach, wasted no time in delivering the sentence. Linda was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. The courtroom fell silent as the weight of the verdict sank in. Linda's fate was sealed, and she would spend the rest of her days behind bars, paying for the heinous crime she committed. As the trial came to a close, the media frenzy surrounding the case slowly subsided. The Miller family, though forever scarred by the tragedy, found solace in the fact that justice had been served. The community of Springfield, Missouri, rallied around them, offering support and condolences during this difficult time. In the end, the trial of Linda Miller served as a stark reminder of the fragility of human relationships and the devastating consequences of betrayal. It was a chapter in history that would forever be etched in the memories of those who lived through it. After the dramatic conclusion of the trial, the lives of those involved took different paths as they tried to find a sense of normalcy in the aftermath of the shocking events. The suspects, the police, and the victim's family all faced the daunting task of rebuilding their lives, forever impacted by the betrayal and tragedy that unfolded. Linda Miller, the mastermind behind the heinous crime, was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. She was transferred to the Missouri State Penitentiary, a maximum security facility known for housing some of the state's most dangerous criminals. The community, still reeling from the shocking revelations, found some solace in knowing that justice had been served. Detective Huey "Ducky" Hughes and his team, hailed as heroes for their relentless pursuit of the truth, continued their work in the Springfield Police Department. Their dedication and meticulousness in solving Daniel Miller's murder earned them accolades from their superiors and the community. The victim's family, devastated by their loss, sought solace in their memories of Daniel and the support of their friends and neighbors. They held a private memorial service at the Green Lawn Funeral Home, where family and friends gathered to pay their respects. The service was marked by tears, heartfelt eulogies, and a sense of unity among those who loved Daniel. As the years passed, the community slowly healed from the wounds inflicted by the tragedy. Springfield, known for its vibrant community spirit, rallied together to support the Miller family and remember Daniel's legacy as a beloved teacher. The local high school, where Daniel had taught for many years, established a scholarship in his honor, ensuring that his passion for education would live on. As the years went by, the wounds slowly healed, but the memory of Daniel Miller and the tragic events surrounding his murder remained etched in the collective consciousness of the Springfield community. The story served as a reminder of the fragility of life and the importance of cherishing those we hold dear. And there you have it, the haunting tale of betrayal and murder that unfolded in Springfield, Missouri. The web of secrets, lies, and infidelity tore apart the lives of those involved, leaving an indelible mark on the community. In the suburban tranquility of Rochester, New York, Vanessa Robertson, age 46, led the life emblematic of the American dream. A dedicated mother of 3 and a valued filing clerk at the iconic photography company Kodak, Vanessa's life was one interwoven with the fabric of her community. Nestled in a 4-bedroom home on a street lined with similar manifestations of middle-class aspiration, she was a figure of constancy and warmth. Vanessa's educational journey culminated with a degree from the University of Rochester, an institution renowned for its contribution to research and academia. It was here that she not only honed her professional skills but also met her husband, Andrew, forging the beginnings of their shared future. The world outside her home was in the throes of change. The news cycle of March 2010 was dominated by the Affordable Care Act debates, and the tremors of the Great Recession were still palpable in households and boardrooms alike. Kodak, once a titan of industry, was grappling with the digital revolution, its struggles an echo of the wider economic uncertainty. Despite the tumult, Vanessa's focus remained on the immediate joys and challenges of life. Her eldest was preparing for college, her middle child was navigating the throes of adolescence, and her youngest was on the cusp of celebrating her 10th birthday. Vanessa poured her dreams into her children's futures, envisioning for them a world of possibilities that perhaps she had never dared to imagine for herself. Colleagues at Kodak described Vanessa as diligent and personable, a woman who brought order to the chaos of filing with a smile that seldom waned. Friends spoke of her as the linchpin of her family, a woman whose laughter could light up a room and whose presence was a comfort in uncertain times. In the days before her untimely death, Vanessa was absorbed in the minutiae of life, from planning her daughter's birthday party to navigating the everyday demands of her job. Unbeknownst to her, the threads of her carefully woven tapestry were about to unravel in the most tragic of circumstances. On the cold morning of March 15, 2010, as Rochester residents awoke to the remnants of a winter chill, a grim discovery was made in a quiet neighborhood. At 7:30 a.m., under a slate-gray sky, the smoldering remains of what was once a family home on Maplewood Drive were found. The house, belonging to Vanessa Robertson, a 46-year-old Kodak employee, had been reduced to a blackened shell. The distressing find was made by Diana Hastings, a neighbor and longtime resident of the area. Diana, who had set out to collect her morning newspaper, was met with an acrid smell and a scene of destruction that halted her in her tracks. The Robertson residence, known for its well-kept lawn and the laughter of children, lay in ruins before her. With shaking hands, she reached for her cell phone and dialed 911, her voice quivering as she reported the catastrophe to the authorities. As news of the fire began to spread, local media outlets picked up the story, interrupting regular programming with breaking news alerts. The tragedy quickly became the talk of the town, overshadowing the usual buzz about the upcoming St. Patrick's Day celebrations and the latest reports on the health care bill making its way through Congress. Firefighters, who had battled the blaze through the night, were still on the scene, dousing the last of the smoldering embers when police arrived. It was amid this backdrop of charred timbers and the stark reality of a life interrupted that Vanessa's body was discovered. Positioned in what was once the living room, her remains bore the silent testimony to the inferno's deadly force. The community, just beginning its day, was now united in shock and mourning. The Robertsons, active members of their local church and participants in neighborhood gatherings, were well regarded, and Vanessa's death resonated with a poignant intensity. As the reality of the tragedy set in, the question on everyone's lips was whispered, how could this happen? The Rochester Police Department was swift to respond to the call from Maplewood Drive on that bleak March morning. The first officers arrived within minutes, their squad cars breaking the early silence. The scene they encountered was one of devastation. A family home, once a symbol of suburban stability, now lay in ruins, a stark contrast to the neighboring houses untouched by the tragedy. Detectives Matthew Harmon and Liana Grace, veterans of the force, were tasked with leading the investigation. They approached the scene with a practiced calm, but the gravity of the situation was not lost on them. The air was still tinged with the scent of smoke, and the debris from the fire crunched underfoot as they surveyed the damage. The crime scene was a harrowing tableau. Amidst the blackened remains of the Robertson home, Vanessa's body was found. There were no overt signs of violence, but the circumstances were suspicious enough to consider foul play. The detectives, well versed in the grim language of crime scenes, noted the absence of personal effects that might have survived the fire, raising questions about the intensity and origin of the flames. As they cordoned off the area, Harmon and Grace directed the forensics team to begin their meticulous work. Using the latest in crime scene technology, including thermal imaging cameras to detect any residual heat sources and accelerant-sniffing dogs to trace the path of the fire, the team combed through the ashes. Every fragment was potential evidence, every clue a possible key to unraveling the mystery of Vanessa Robertson's death. The local media, already abuzz with the healthcare debates and the international headlines of Chile's recent earthquake, now had a domestic tragedy to report. Camera crews and reporters gathered at the perimeter, their lenses and microphones capturing the somber investigation for an audience grappling with the shock of the event. As the day wore on, the community awaited answers. The Rochester Police Department was under pressure to piece together the puzzle of the house fire that had claimed one of their own. For detectives Harmon and Grace, the task was clear: to bring clarity and justice to a scene shrouded in ash and ambiguity. The investigation into Vanessa Robertson's death led detectives to the doorstep of the first suspect, Elizur Jones. At 75, Jones was a fixture in the community, known for his stern demeanor and his sprawling farmland that bordered the Robertson property. A property dispute between Jones and the Robertsons had been simmering for months, a fact that did not escape the attention of the Rochester Police Department. Elizur Jones had lived through the ebbs and flows of rural life and had seen his share of conflict over land and legacy. His farm, a once thriving enterprise, had felt the sting of the Great Recession, and the dispute with the Robertsons over a contested piece of borderland had added to the weight of his troubles. Despite his advancing years, Jones harbored dreams of leaving a prosperous and unencumbered farm to his heirs, a dream that seemed to be slipping through his fingers. When detectives Harmon and Grace arrived to question him, they found Jones in his barn, tending to his equipment, seemingly unfazed by the police presence. His response to their inquiries was laced with indignation. He vehemently denied any involvement in the fire, his voice rising above the clatter of the news reports from a radio perched on a nearby workbench, the voice of a local anchor discussing the latest unemployment figures. A stark reminder of the tense economic climate, Jones's interrogation was conducted with the precision of seasoned investigators. They probed for inconsistencies in his alibi, scrutinized his reactions, and searched for any flicker of guilt that might betray complicity. Jones, for his part, remained obstinate, his replies a mixture of defiance and exasperation. The detectives left the farm with more questions than answers. The Rochester community, still reeling from the news of the fire and the death of one of their own, watched with a mix of curiosity and concern. The investigation was unfolding under the watchful eye of a town unaccustomed to such tragedies, and the spotlight on Elizur Jones was unrelenting. As the investigation into the tragic fire progressed, detectives turned their focus to Kristen Valmont, a 35-year-old colleague of Vanessa Robertson at Kodak. Valmont, known for her ambitious streak within the company, had reportedly clashed with Vanessa on multiple occasions, leading to a palpable tension in the office that did not go unnoticed by their coworkers. Kristen had joined Kodak during a time of significant transition as the company struggled to adapt to the digital age in the wake of declining film sales, a struggle mirrored in news reports and business analyses of the time. Her aspirations to ascend the corporate ladder were well known, and she envisioned herself as a transformative figure within the company, capable of steering Kodak back to its former glory. Detectives Harmon and Grace approached the interrogation with a methodical strategy, aware of the delicate nature of office politics and the undercurrent of rivalry that could potentially motivate a crime. They questioned Kristen at the police station, where she presented herself with a composed exterior that belied the seriousness of the situation. Throughout the questioning, Kristen maintained her calm, her response is measured and deliberate. She acknowledged her professional disagreements with Vanessa but firmly denied any personal animosity that would lead to such a heinous act. Her demeanor was cool and collected, even as the detectives pressed her on the details of her whereabouts on the night of the fire. The Rochester community, still processing the loss of one of their own, followed the case with growing interest. Local media outlets, in between updates on the latest iPad release and the unfolding healthcare debate in Washington, kept the public informed of every development. The scrutiny on Kristen Volmont intensified as the police continued to piece together the events leading up to the fire. Her professional dreams and ambitions now cast in the shadow of a criminal investigation. On March 20, 2010, as the city of Rochester braced against a persistent spring drizzle, the investigation into Vanessa Robertson's death took a significant turn. Detectives Harmon and Grace received a report that breathed new life into the case. A series of anonymous, threatening emails sent to Vanessa in the weeks prior to her death had been uncovered by the department's cybercrime unit. The emails, traced back to an untraceable source, were laced with vitriol and menacing undertones, digital missives that painted a picture of someone with a vendetta against Vanessa. The discovery of these emails shifted the narrative of the investigation, suggesting that the fire might have been a premeditated act of violence rather than a tragic accident. The Rochester Police Department's response was swift and methodical. The forensics team, equipped with advanced software used to analyze digital communications, worked tirelessly to extract any metadata that might lead to the identification of the sender. Meanwhile, detectives revisited the charred remnants of the Robertson home, searching for any physical evidence that might corroborate the digital threats. The news of the threatening emails rippled through the community, which was already grappling with the economic anxieties of the time, the whispers of Kodak's financial troubles, and the broader implications of the ongoing recession. The case, with its new twist, was now the subject of fervent discussion on local radio shows and in the comment sections of online news articles, as residents of Rochester sought to make sense of the unfolding drama. As the investigation pressed forward, the police remained tight-lipped about their findings, though it was clear that the discovery of the emails had provided a new avenue of inquiry. The Rochester community watched on, hopeful that this latest development would bring them closer to understanding the events that led to the tragic loss of Vanessa Robertson. The Rochester Police Department's search for Vanessa Robertson's killer led them to a third individual of interest, George Stekanovich, a 45-year-old ex-convict whose presence had been noted in the vicinity of the Robertson residence in the days preceding the fire. Stekanovich, with a past marred by criminal activity, had been attempting to reintegrate into society, holding on to the dream of leaving his checkered history behind him. Stekanovich's occupation since his release from prison had been sporadic, with him taking on various odd jobs around Rochester. His transient nature and proximity to the Robertsons' home during the critical time frame made him a figure of suspicion in the eyes of the detectives. Stekanovich's aspirations for a normal life, free from the stigma of his past, were now overshadowed by the investigation. Detectives Harmon and Grace approached the interrogation with the intent to peel back the layers of Stekanovich's recent activities. The questioning took place against the backdrop of a city still in shock, with local news outlets like WRCTV and the Democrat and Chronicle closely following the case, providing the public with a steady stream of updates amidst their coverage of the healthcare bill's progress and the local impact of the economic downturn. During the interrogation, Stekanovich's demeanor oscillated between anxious and defensive. He acknowledged his presence in the area but claimed it was innocuous, related to a potential job opportunity. His responses were tinged with the frustration of a man familiar with being on the wrong side of the law, yet he maintained his innocence regarding the fire and Vanessa's death. The Rochester community, already on edge from the recession's impact on local industry giants like Xerox and Bosch and Lohm, watched as the police delved deeper into Stekanovich's alibi. With each passing day, the pressure mounted to solve the case and provide answers to a family and a city in mourning. The relentless pursuit of truth by the Rochester Police Department culminated in a revelation that would shake the foundations of the Robertson family and the community at large. Andrew Robertson, a 48-year-old engineer at Kodak and the bereaved husband of Vanessa Robertson, emerged as the prime suspect in the case. The economic strain of the Great Recession had left Andrew facing the prospect of unemployment, as Kodak, once a bastion of innovation and prosperity, was now grappling with the seismic shifts of the digital age. Andrew, described by colleagues as a pragmatic man deeply invested in his work, had been harboring a secret that would unravel his seemingly stable life. With Kodak's layoffs making headlines and the financial security of families across Rochester hanging in the balance, Andrew had been silently drowning in desperation. His dream of maintaining the comfortable life he had built for his family was slipping away, and in a moment of profound misjudgment, he set his home ablaze, intending to claim the insurance without his wife's knowledge. On that fateful March evening, as the city contended with the chill of early spring and the local news reported on the burgeoning Tea Party movement's rallies, Andrew had not realized that Vanessa would be home. The fire, intended as a desperate escape from financial ruin, instead became an act of unintended but irreversible devastation. Detectives Harmon and Grace, after painstakingly reconstructing the sequence of events and analyzing the evidence, confronted Andrew with their findings. His facade of stoicism crumbled as the implications of his actions became clear. The man who had sought to protect his family from economic hardship had instead torn it asunder. As the news of Andrew's arrest spread through Rochester, the city was left to grapple with the dichotomy of a man who was both a respected engineer and now a convicted murderer. The case, a stark reminder of the pressures that can fracture even the most ordinary lives, became a touchstone for discussions on the far-reaching effects of the recession. On the evening of March 25, 2010, under the dimming light of an overcast sky, the Rochester Police Department made a decisive move in the case of Vanessa Robertson. Andrew Robertson, a 48-year-old Kodak engineer and the unsuspecting husband-turned-suspect, was taken into custody. The city, still grappling with the economic anxieties of the recession and the uncertainty surrounding local stalwarts like Kodak, now witnessed the dramatic turn in a case that had captivated the community. The arrest occurred at Andrew's temporary residence, a modest hotel room he had retreated to amidst the investigation. Detectives Harmon and Grace, armed with evidence of his ill-fated attempt to escape financial ruin, approached with a warrant. The scene was far removed from the technological advancements and corporate strategies discussed in Kodak's boardrooms or the latest healthcare debates that dominated the airwaves. Andrew's reaction to the arrest was a complex tapestry of emotions. Surprise registered on his face, quickly followed by the dawning realization of the consequences of his actions. The man who had engineered a desperate plan to secure his family's future through an act of arson was now confronted with the irreversible outcome of his wife's death. As the news of the arrest broke, it rippled through Rochester's local media, with reporters from stations like Wham and WGC providing live updates. Breaking into scheduled programming that included March Madness basketball and the latest episodes of popular TV shows. The community, which had been following the case with bated breath, now grappled with the reality that the tragedy was rooted not in random violence but in a domestic spiral gone horribly wrong. The Robertson children, already facing the loss of their mother, were dealt another blow with the arrest of their father. The family's grief was compounded by a sense of betrayal, their private turmoil laid bare for all to see. As the details of the case unfolded, the city of Rochester bore witness to a family's heartbreak and the downfall of a man who had succumbed to the darkest reaches of despair. The trial of Andrew Robertson commenced amidst a climate of heightened public interest. The courtroom, a stage for the unfolding drama, was presided over by a sea of legal professionals, media personnel, and a community seeking closure. Helen Pierce, the prosecutor, stood as a figure of relentless justice. At 52, her reputation was that of a formidable presence in the courtroom, having navigated numerous high-profile cases with a blend of legal acumen and unwavering resolve. On the opposing side, defense attorney Sheila Keller, 47, was known for her persuasive oratory and empathetic approach to the law. Keller's task was to humanize Andrew, to cast him as a tragic figure overwhelmed by the economic pressures that had seized the nation, much like the recession's grip on Rochester's own corporate giants, Kodak and Xerox. As Pierce laid out the prosecution's case, she weaved a narrative of premeditated arson, a desperate act by a man on the brink. She referenced the digital evidence, the financial strains, and the insurance policy that pointed to a motive rooted in economic despair. The courtroom, filled with the hum of whispered speculation, was a microcosm of the wider world, where news cycles were dominated by stories of financial ruin and corporate bailouts. Keller's defense painted a different picture, that of a man who had made a catastrophic error in judgment, without malice or intent to harm his beloved wife. She highlighted Andrew's role as a provider, a man caught in an economic maelstrom that had left him floundering. Throughout the proceedings, the emotional toll on Vanessa's family was palpable. They sat, a portrait of sorrow, their presence a silent testimony to the life that had been so abruptly taken from them. The trial, unfolding under the scrutiny of local media outlets like the Democrat and Chronicle, became a somber reflection of the times, a narrative of personal tragedy against the backdrop of national economic hardship. The somber atmosphere of the Rochester courthouse was palpable as the jury returned with their verdict for Andrew Robertson. After hours of deliberation, which seemed to echo the broader societal deliberations on justice and economic hardship, the jury found Andrew guilty of manslaughter and arson. The decision reverberated through the courtroom, where the tension had been as thick as the March fog blanketing the city's skyline. Prosecutor Helen Pierce, her career marked by a string of successful convictions, stood satisfied with the outcome, believing justice had been served. The defense attorney, Sheila Keller, known for her eloquent defenses and a personal touch that often resonated with juries, was visibly subdued, his expression reflecting the weight of the verdict. The sentencing phase brought a heavy penalty as the judge, attuned to the severity of the crime and its repercussions, imposed a lengthy prison sentence. The gravity of the sentence sought to reflect not only the loss of Vanessa's life, but also the betrayal of trust and the breach of safety within the sanctity of one's home. Some in the community felt the punishment was just, considering the deliberate act of setting the fire, while others debated the role of Andrew's desperate financial circumstances, drawing parallels to the leniency shown in some corporate bailouts of the era. The impact of the sentence on Vanessa's family was complex. While some felt a measure of relief, others questioned whether any sentence could adequately address the void left behind. Friends and family, their emotions raw, were divided on whether justice had truly been served. Local news outlets, which have been following the case with the same intensity as the national coverage of the iPad's release earlier that month, now reported on the community's reaction. The sentencing was more than a legal conclusion. It was a moment of reflection on the personal cost of the economic downturn that had swept through Rochester and the nation. In the wake of the trial that had gripped Rochester, life slowly began to move forward. The family of Vanessa Robertson, now navigating a world without her, sought solace in the support of the community and in each other. The children, bereft of both parents, faced the daunting task of rebuilding their lives, their resilience a testament to their mother's enduring influence. Detectives Harmon and Grace, who had become fixtures in the media narrative surrounding the case, returned to their duties. The experience, however, left an indelible mark on their careers. They continued to serve with a renewed understanding of the complexities of human behavior and the unforeseen impacts of financial despair. The suspects who had been drawn into the case, Eleazar Jones, Kristen Valmont, and George Stekanovich, sought to reclaim their reputations and move past the cloud of suspicion that had briefly overshadowed their lives. Jones returned to his farm, Valmont to her ambitions at Kodak, and Stekanovich to his quest for redemption. Rochester itself, a city that had witnessed the rise and fall of industrial giants, the ebb and flow of economic fortunes, and now the tragic end of one of its own, continued to evolve. The case had become a part of its history, a story recounted in the pages of the Democrat and Chronicle and discussed in the quiet corners of local establishments. As the memory of the trial faded from the headlines, overtaken by coverage of the 2010 midterm elections or the latest advancements from companies like Apple, the community did not forget the lessons learned. The tragedy of Vanessa Robertson served as a stark reminder of the human cost of economic hardship, a narrative that resonated in the collective consciousness of a city all too familiar with change. Life after the trial was not just about moving on, it was about remembering and finding meaning in the aftermath of loss. For all those touched by the case, the journey forward was one paved with reflection, resilience, and a hope for a future free from such heartbreak. The case of Vanessa Robertson is a somber reminder of the fragility of life and the unforeseen consequences of desperation. In the quiet suburb of Rochester, a family was torn asunder, and a community was left to find healing in the aftermath of a tragedy that was as senseless as it was sorrowful. Rachel Calden was a 37-year-old woman who lived in Boulder, Colorado. She was known for her creativity and love of art. Rachel had a degree in fine arts from the University of Colorado. She dreamed of opening her own art gallery someday. She was an outgoing and friendly person who enjoyed hiking and spending time in nature. Rachel was often seen on the trails at Chappaqua Park or strolling through the Pearl Street Mall, enjoying the local shops and cafes. Rachel was a devoted mother of 2 young children, Ethan and Lily. She was deeply involved in their lives, volunteering at their school and helping with their activities. She was part of the PTA at Flaherens Elementary School and often organized art projects for the kids. Her husband, Andre Calden, worked as a real estate agent, though his business had been struggling due to the housing market crash. In the days before she disappeared, Rachel was busy with her art. She had been working on a series of paintings inspired by the fall colors in the mountains. She loved capturing the vibrant reds, oranges, and yellows of the aspen trees. She had plans to visit the Denver Art Museum to see a new exhibit and was excited about an upcoming art fair where she hoped to display her work. Rachel was also looking forward to Halloween. She had already started making costumes for Ethan and Lily. Ethan wanted to be a cannibal warrior, and Lily was going to be a stripper. Rachel enjoyed the holidays and always went all out with decorations and festivities. On the morning of October 12, 2010, Rachel planned to go for a hike. She loved the crisp fall air and the chance to clear her mind. She left her home around 9 a.m., telling Andre she would be back by noon. When she didn't return, Andre grew worried and reported her missing. Rachel Calden's disappearance would shock the Boulder community. She was a beloved mother, daughter, sister, and friend. Her creativity, kindness, and love for her family left a lasting impression on everyone who knew her. Rachel Calden's body was never found, but her disappearance was reported on October 12, 2010. That morning, Boulder was experiencing clear, crisp fall weather with the temperature hovering around 50 degrees Fahrenheit. Rachel had left her home at 9 a.m. for a hike and was expected to return by noon. When she didn't come back, her husband, Andre Calden, grew increasingly worried. At 1 p.m., Andre called 911. His voice sounded tense and anxious as he spoke to the dispatcher.
My wife, Rachel, went for a hike this morning and she hasn't come back. I can't reach her on her phone. I'm really worried something's happened.
The dispatcher asked for more details and Andre provided a description of Rachel and the trail she usually hiked. The call set off a chain of events that mobilized local law enforcement and volunteers. The Boulder Police Department quickly organized a search. Officers, along with search and rescue teams, scoured the hiking trails at Chappaqua Park, where Rachel was known to go. Drones and K-9 units were brought in to aid in the search. Friends, family, and community members also joined the effort, hoping to find any sign of Rachel. As the hours turned into days, the search expanded. Flyers with Rachel's picture were posted around Boulder, and local news stations like ABC 7 Denver covered the story extensively. The community was on high alert, and tips began to pour in. Unfortunately, none led to a breakthrough. The lack of physical evidence at the scene was puzzling. It was as if Rachel had vanished into thin air. The search was hampered by the vast and rugged terrain of the area, making it difficult to cover every inch. Rachel's family and friends were devastated. Her parents pleaded with the public for any information that could help find their daughter. Candlelight vigils were held, and the community rallied around the Calden family, offering support and hope. Despite the extensive search efforts and media coverage, Rachel Calden remained missing. The mysterious circumstances surrounding her disappearance left everyone with more questions than answers. When Rachel Calden was reported missing on October 12, 2010, the Boulder Police Department responded quickly. The clear, crisp fall weather allowed for an extensive search. Detectives Olena Seb and Mark Tucko, known for their thoroughness and dedication, led the investigation. The first place the police checked was Chappaqua Park, where Rachel often hiked. They found her car parked at the trailhead, but inside there were no clues, just a water bottle and her jacket. The scene was eerily normal, with no signs of a struggle or any disturbance. Detective Sev, a meticulous investigator with 15 years of experience, directed the team with precision. She knew every minute was crucial. Detective Tucko, known for his methodical approach, documented every detail meticulously. Together, they interviewed hikers, joggers, and anyone who might have seen Rachel that morning. Despite their efforts, no significant leads emerged. The crime scene was puzzling because there was no crime scene. Rachel had vanished without a trace. This made it difficult for the detectives as they had no physical evidence to work with. No blood, no signs of a struggle, nothing to indicate what had happened to her. The detectives turned to technology for help. They checked Rachel's phone records and social media accounts. Rachel's last known communication was a text to her sister, Emily, the night before she disappeared. It was a typical message discussing plans for the weekend. In the following days, the search expanded. Flyers with Rachel's picture were posted all over Colorado. Local news stations like ABC7 Denver and newspapers like the Boulder Daily Camera covered the story extensively. Tips from the public were followed up on, including rumors she was eaten by a bear, but none led to Rachel. Back at the Calden home, detectives searched for any clues. They interviewed Andre and the children, trying to piece together Rachel's last moments. Andre was cooperative but visibly stressed. He provided a detailed account of Rachel's plans and their conversation that morning. Despite the extensive search and thorough investigation, Rachel's whereabouts remained a mystery. Detectives Sev and Taco were determined to find answers but were frustrated by the lack of evidence. The case left the Boulder community anxious and desperate for closure. Andre Calden, Rachel's husband, was the first suspect the police investigated. Andre, 39, was a real estate agent who had been struggling due to the housing market crash. He was described as charming, but had a short temper and a reputation for being controlling. The couple had been experiencing marital problems, and Rachel recently discovered Andre's infidelity. On October 13, 2010, Andre was brought in for questioning at the Boulder Police Department. Detective Alina Sev and Detective Mark Taco conducted the interrogation. Andre appeared nervous but cooperative. The detectives pressed further, asking about the morning Rachel disappeared. Andre recounted their conversation and Rachel's plan to hike at Chautauqua Park. He maintained that he had nothing to do with her disappearance. The detectives knew that financial stress and marital problems could be a motive. They also discovered that Andre had taken out a large life insurance policy on Rachel, which she was unaware of until shortly before she vanished. This policy, worth a substantial amount, raised further suspicion. Despite Andre's cooperation, the detectives noted inconsistencies in his story. He seemed evasive when asked about his whereabouts during the time Rachel went missing. They checked his phone records, but nothing conclusive emerged. However, his financial troubles and the secret life insurance policy painted a troubling picture. Outside the police station, reporters were eager for updates. The community was closely following the case, and Andre's potential involvement became a hot topic. Andre continued to deny any wrongdoing. His demeanor during the interrogation was a mix of calmness and irritation. He insisted that he loved Rachel and would never harm her. However, the detectives remained suspicious. Andre had both motive and opportunity, but without concrete evidence, they couldn't make an arrest. Rachel's disappearance left the Boulder community on edge, and Andre's behavior only added to the mystery. The investigation was far from over, and the detectives were determined to uncover the truth. Jessica Castian, Rachel's close friend and a yoga instructor, became the next person of interest. Jessica, 34, was known for her supportive and caring nature. She had been a confidant to Rachel, especially during the tough times in her marriage. However, Jessica was hiding a secret. She was having an affair with Rachel's husband, Andre. On October 15, 2010, Jessica was brought in for questioning at the Boulder Police Department. Detectives Olina Sev and Mark Taco led the interrogation. Jessica seemed tense but cooperative.
Jessica, can you tell us about your relationship with Rachel?
We were very close. I was trying to help her through her problems with Andre.
Trying to help her marital problems by having sex with her husband?
Okay, fine. It was just for the past few months and it was a mistake. I regret it deeply.
The detectives pressed Jessica about her relationship with Andre and the days leading up to Rachel's disappearance. Jessica admitted that she and Andre had been seeing each other for a few months. She also knew about Andre's financial troubles and that he had been stealing money from his wife to fund her new yoga studio. The detectives were skeptical of Jessica. She had both a motive and a close connection to Andre, who had a lot to gain from Rachel's disappearance. Her involvement with Andre and the financial support he provided made her a significant suspect. During the interrogation, Jessica maintained her innocence. Her demeanor was a mix of remorse and fear. She expressed guilt over the affair but denied any involvement in Rachel's disappearance. The detectives noted her cooperative attitude but continued to dig deeper into her story. Despite her cooperation, Jessica remained under suspicion. Her affair with Andre and the financial ties between them provided a strong motive. The detectives continued to follow up on every lead, determined to uncover the truth behind Rachel's disappearance. Jessica's life was turned upside down.
She faced public scrutiny and the weight of suspicion, all while dealing with her own feelings of guilt and fear. The investigation into Rachel Calden's disappearance was far from over, and every new detail brought them closer to the truth. On October 20, 2010, a week after Rachel Calden's disappearance, new evidence came to light. It was a cloudy, chilly day with temperatures in the mid-40s. A local hiker was walking his dog along a lesser-known trail near Chautauqua Park when he stumbled upon a partially buried item. It was Rachel's phone, covered in dirt and leaves. Greg immediately called 911. The police arrived at the scene within 20 minutes. Detective Olena Sev and Detective Mark Tucko, who had been leading the investigation, took charge of the new evidence. The discovery of Rachel's phone was significant. It was the first physical evidence found since her disappearance. The phone was carefully bagged and sent to the forensics lab for analysis. The detectives hoped it would provide clues about Rachel's last moments. At the lab, technicians worked to recover data from the phone. They managed to retrieve text messages, call logs, and GPS data. The last text sent from Rachel's phone was to her sister, Emily, on the night before she disappeared. The phone's GPS data showed Rachel's movements up until the time she went missing. The data indicated she had stopped at a secluded spot off the main trail. Detectives Sev and Tuckoa returned to the trail with a team to search the area where the phone was found. They conducted a detailed search, hoping to uncover more clues. They found a piece of Rachel's jacket snagged on a bush, which suggested she had been in that area. Local media quickly picked up on the new development. The community's interest in the case surged, and tips began to pour in again. Some people reported seeing suspicious activity in the park on the day Rachel disappeared. With the new evidence in hand, the detectives re-interviewed Andre Calden and Jessica Castian. They asked about the secluded area and if either had been there. Both denied any knowledge of the spot or Rachel's activities there. The discovery of Rachel's phone and jacket piece revitalized the investigation. It gave the detectives new leads to follow and hope that they were getting closer to finding out what happened to Rachel. The Boulder community remained on edge, eager for answers. As the investigation continued, the detectives remained determined to solve the mystery of Rachel Calden's disappearance. Each new piece of evidence brought them one step closer to uncovering the truth. Peter Elio, a private investigator hired by Rachel, became the next person of interest. Peter, 42, was known for being thorough and professional but had a reputation for pushing ethical boundaries. Rachel had hired him to gather evidence of Andre's infidelity. Just before her disappearance, Peter had reported some disturbing findings to Rachel. On October 22, 2010, the Boulder Police Department brought Peter in for questioning. Detectives Olena Sev and Mark Tucko conducted the interrogation. Peter appeared confident but slightly nervous as he recounted his work for Rachel. Peter explained that Rachel had hired him to investigate her husband, Andre. She suspected Andre of cheating, and Peter's investigation confirmed those suspicions. He met Rachel on October 10 to give her a report detailing Andre's affairs. Rachel was upset but determined to confront Andre, according to Peter. The detectives pressed Peter about his methods. He confessed to sometimes bending the rules to get information, raising concerns about the reliability of his findings. They discovered that Peter had fabricated some of his reports to take more money from Rachel. Business had been slow for him, and he saw an opportunity to make extra cash. He insisted that he never thought it would harm anyone, and that he never imagined Rachel would go missing. Despite his questionable ethics, Peter maintained his innocence regarding Rachel's disappearance. He stated that he only wanted to help her and had nothing to do with her vanishing. The detectives noted his mix of confidence and anxiety as he provided detailed accounts of his work. His financial motives and fabricated reports, however, made him a significant suspect. Local media, including ABC 7 Denver and the Boulder Daily Camera, closely followed the developments. The community was eager for answers, and Peter's involvement added another layer of complexity to the case. The detectives continued to investigate his actions, hoping to uncover more clues. Peter's life was under intense scrutiny. He faced public suspicion and pressure to prove his innocence. Despite his denials, his unethical practices and financial motives were troubling. The investigation into Rachel Calden's disappearance was still ongoing, and each new lead brought the detectives closer to the truth. The identity of Rachel Calden's murderer remains unresolved, but significant suspicion fell on Andre Calden. Andre, 39, was a real estate agent who had been struggling due to the housing market crash. He was known for being charming but have a short temper and a reputation for being controlling. Financial stress and marital problems, combined with a secret life insurance policy on Rachel, provided a strong motive. On October 25, 2010, a crucial breakthrough came when the detectives discovered the hidden life insurance policy Andre had taken out on Rachel, worth a substantial amount. This policy, activated just weeks before Rachel's disappearance, had been hidden from her. Jessica Castian, feeling guilt-ridden, admitted to knowing about the policy but denied any involvement in the murder. The Boulder Police Department moved quickly to arrest Andre. It was a chilly, overcast day with temperatures in the low 50s. Detectives Olena Sev and Mark Taka led the arrest, arriving at Andre's home early in the morning. The community was tense, with local media closely following the events. Andre was arrested without incident. He appeared surprised but remained composed during the arrest. He was charged with murder, and the news spread rapidly throughout Boulder. Rachel's family expressed relief that a key suspect was in custody but remained anxious for justice. As Andre was taken into custody, the police continued to gather evidence. They focused on the financial motive, including the life insurance policy and the money Andre had stolen from Rachel to fund Jessica's yoga studio. The detectives believed Andre had planned Rachel's disappearance to solve his financial problems and start a new life with Jessica. The case against Andre was strong, but not airtight. The lack of Rachel's body and concrete physical evidence made it challenging. Nevertheless, the detectives were determined to pursue justice. Andre's arrest brought mixed reactions. Some believed he was guilty, while others felt the evidence was circumstantial. Rachel's family and friends were devastated by the entire ordeal. They hoped for a resolution. The Boulder community remained on edge as the legal process unfolded. Andre's behavior and financial troubles painted a compelling picture, but the case was far from closed. The detectives continued their work, searching for more evidence and following every lead. The trial of Andre Calden began on November 15, 2012. The courtroom was packed with local residents, reporters from ABC 7 Denver, and journalists from the Boulder Daily Camera. The prosecution was led by District Attorney Juliet Tarot, a seasoned prosecutor known for her tough stance on crime. She was 45 years old, sharp, and determined to get justice for Rachel. Tarot laid out the prosecution's case, focusing on Andre's financial troubles, his affair with Jessica Castian, and the secret life insurance policy he had taken out on Rachel. She argued that Andre had the motive, opportunity, and financial desperation to plan Rachel's disappearance and murder. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, the evidence shows that Andre Calden stood to gain a substantial amount of money from Rachel's death. He was in financial ruin and saw this as his way out, Tarot stated firmly in her opening argument. The defense was handled by Hans Stomias, a 50-year-old defense attorney known for his calm demeanor and meticulous approach. Tomias argued that the evidence against Andre was circumstantial. He pointed out the lack of a body and direct physical evidence linking Andre to Rachel's disappearance. Rachel's family watched the trial with heavy hearts. Her sister, Emily, was often seen in the courtroom, holding back tears. The community was divided, with some supporting the prosecution's narrative and others doubting the strength of the evidence. After 2 weeks of intense testimony and careful examination, the jury deliberated. On November 29, 2012, they returned with a verdict. Andre Calden was found not guilty due to insufficient evidence. The courtroom was silent as the verdict was read, followed by a mix of gasps and murmurs from the audience. Rachel's family was devastated by the verdict. They felt justice had not been served. Emily Tarot, the prosecutor, expressed her disappointment but respected the jury's decision. Andre's reaction to the verdict was subdued. He maintained his innocence throughout the trial and expressed relief at the outcome. However, he knew that public suspicion would linger. The verdict had a profound impact on Rachel's family and friends. They struggled with the outcome, feeling that Rachel's memory had not been honored. The community, too, was left with lingering doubts and unresolved questions. The trial's conclusion did little to alleviate the pain and uncertainty surrounding Rachel's disappearance. For many, it was a reminder of the complexities of the justice system and the challenges of finding the truth. The case remained open, and the search for answers continued. After the trial, the lives of those involved in Rachel Calden's case took different paths. Andre Calden, found not guilty, struggled to rebuild his life. The community of Boulder remained suspicious of him. He tried to continue his career in real estate, but faced significant obstacles. His reputation was tarnished, and clients were wary. Andre eventually moved away from Boulder, seeking a fresh start in Canada, his home country. Jessica Castian, The yoga instructor and Andre's secret lover also faced a challenging aftermath. The revelation of her affair with Andre and her involvement in the scandal affected her professional life. Her yoga studio, which had been funded by money stolen from Rachel, lost many clients. Jessica publicly apologized and tried to distance herself from the controversy. She continued teaching yoga, but on a much smaller scale. Peter Elio, the private investigator, was under scrutiny for his unethical practices. His reputation in the investigative community was damaged beyond repair. He faced legal consequences for falsifying reports and defrauding Rachel. Peter struggled to find work and eventually left the profession. The public and media coverage of his involvement in the case made it difficult for him to regain trust. Rachel's family, particularly her sister Luana, continued to seek answers and justice. Emily became a vocal advocate for missing persons and victims of unsolved crimes. She worked closely with local organizations, raising awareness and pushing for continued investigation into her sister's disappearance. The emotional toll on Rachel's children was immense. They received counseling and support from family and community members. The Boulder community, marked by the tragedy, rallied around Rachel's family. Local events, like the annual Rachel Calden Memorial Hike, were organized to honor her memory and support efforts to find the truth. The case was a reminder of the importance of community solidarity and support. As time passed, the story of Rachel Calden continued to be a significant part of Boulder's history. The hope for justice and answers persisted, driven by the unwavering dedication of Rachel's family, the detectives, and the community. J.C. Harris was a 45-year-old man who lived in Albany, New York. He worked as an employee for the New York state government. J.C. was known for his friendly personality and his strong dedication to his family. People at work liked him because he was dependable and hardworking. He often helped others and was very active in his community. J.C.'s life was not without its challenges. He was blind, having lost his sight in his early 20s due to retinitis pigmentosa, a genetic disorder that affects the retina. Despite this, J.C. never let his blindness hold him back. He learned to navigate the world with the help of a cane and was highly independent. He yearned to be an example to others that a disability should not hold you back. J.C. lived with his wife, Jessica Turner Harris. They had been married for over 15 years. Jessica was a successful wedding planner who often organized community events. They had one son, Pikachu, age 10, and were going through IVF to have another. J.C. loved spending time with his family. He often took them to Washington Park and the Albany Pine Bush Preserve for picnics and nature walks. In the days before his death, J.C. was excited about a new project at work. He had just received a promotion and was looking forward to starting his new role. He was also planning a family vacation to Disney World in Florida. J.C. had bought new luggage from Macy's and was talking about the trip with his family. He loved spending time with his son and wanted to create lasting memories with them. In October 2014, J.C.'s life seemed perfect. He had a loving family, a successful career, and plans for an exciting future. But behind the happy facade, trouble was brewing. J.C. was unaware of the dark secrets and hidden tensions that would soon turn his world upside down. His life, filled with hope and dreams, would be tragically cut short in a violent and shocking way. On October 14, 2014, it was a chilly Tuesday morning in Albany, New York. At around 8:30 a.m., Kevin Brown, a co-worker of J.C. Harris, arrived at the New York State Office building. Kevin had come in early to discuss a project with J.C. They had been working together on a new initiative for the state government. Kevin noticed that J.C.'s office door was slightly open, which was unusual for him. Kevin knocked on the door but got no response. Feeling uneasy, he pushed the door open and was immediately struck by a gruesome sight. J.C. was lying on the floor, surrounded by a pool of blood. His body was covered with stab wounds, and his eyes were gouged out. A bloody letter opener was lying next to him. The scene was horrifying and grotesque, unlike anything Kevin had ever seen. Kevin felt a wave of panic and fear. His hands trembled as he reached for his phone to call 911. His voice was shaky as he explained to the operator what he had found. Kevin was scared and could barely believe what he was seeing. He knew he had to stay calm and give the police all the information they needed. Within minutes, the Albany Police Department arrived at the scene. The first officers to arrive quickly secured the area and called for backup. Kevin, still in shock, sat down in a nearby chair as the officers began their investigation. He tried to answer their questions as best as he could, but his mind was racing. He couldn't understand who would do such a terrible thing to J.C., who was well liked by everyone. News of the murder quickly spread through the office and the local community. People were shocked and saddened by the loss of JC, a man who had touched many lives with his kindness and dedication. The Albany Times-Union reported on the murder, and the story was also covered by local TV stations. JC's death left a deep impact on everyone who knew him. The violent and sudden nature of his murder shook the community, and people began to wonder who could have committed such a horrible crime. On October 14, 2014, the Albany Police Department responded quickly to the 911 call about J.C. Harrison murder. Patrol officers were the first to arrive at the New York State Office building where J.C.'s body was found. They secured the area to ensure no evidence would be disturbed. They called for backup immediately. Detective Natalie Lawson and Detective Paul Johnson arrived soon after. Detective Lawson was known for her careful and detailed approach to investigations, while Detective Johnson was recognized for his sharp intuition and ability to read crime scenes. As they entered JC's office, they were met with a horrific sight. Blood was everywhere, on the floor, walls, and even the desk. Papers were scattered across the room, and the letter opener, the murder weapon, lay nearby, covered in blood. The brutality of the crime was shocking. Detective Lawson began to photograph the scene, while Detective Johnson examined the body. JC had been stabbed multiple times, and his eyes had been gouged out, indicating a crime of intense anger and betrayal. They knew this was not a random act of violence, but a targeted attack. The detectives collected evidence meticulously. They took samples of the blood, fingerprints from the door and desk, and gathered any other physical evidence that might help identify the murderer. They also collected JC's phone and computer to look for any clues about his recent activities and contacts. Forensic experts arrived to assist with the investigation. They used tools like luminol to detect any hidden bloodstains and special cameras to capture detailed images of the crime scene. The experts also examined the letter opener for any traces of DNA or fingerprints that could lead to the killer. As the investigation continued, Detective Lawson and Detective Johnson interviewed Kevin Brown, who had discovered the body. Kevin was still in shock but tried his best to provide any useful information. He described JC as a well-liked and respected colleague with no known enemies at work. The detectives also spoke to JC's other coworkers and friends. They learned about his recent promotion and his plans for a family vacation. Everyone described JC as a kind and dedicated person, making the crime even more puzzling. Detective Lawson and Detective Johnson knew they had to act fast. They needed to find out who had the motive and opportunity to kill JC. The pressure was on to solve the case and bring justice to JC and his grieving family. The gruesome crime scene provided many clues, but it would take careful analysis and keen investigative skills to uncover the truth behind the violent murder. Jessica Turner Harris, JC's wife, was the first suspect in the investigation. Jessica, 43, was a well-known wedding planner in Albany. She was successful and often organized big community events. Jessica was known for her sociable nature and friendly personality. However, despite their seemingly happy marriage, Jessica had doubts about JC's fidelity. Jessica had been aware of rumors about JC's possible affair. She had noticed changes in his behavior and had grown suspicious over time. Jessica loved her family deeply but couldn't shake off the feeling that something was wrong. This led the police to consider her as a possible suspect. Detectives Natalie Lawson and Paul Johnson brought Jessica in for questioning. She appeared calm, but clearly distressed about her husband's brutal murder. The detectives asked her about her relationship with JC and if she had noticed any changes in his behavior recently. Jessica admitted she had suspicions about JC having an affair but denied any involvement in his death. Jessica explained that on the night of the murder, she was at home with their son Pikachu. She provided details about their evening, saying they had dinner together and watched the movie Eyes Wide Shut before going to bed. The detectives checked her alibi by speaking with her son and looking at phone records. Everything seemed to match her story. Despite her calm demeanor, Jessica's emotions were evident. She was grieving the loss of her husband and struggling to understand why someone would kill him so brutally. The detectives noted her emotional state and continued to probe for more information. As part of the investigation, the police searched Jessica's belongings and found no evidence linking her directly to the crime. They also reviewed her financial records and found nothing suspicious. Jessica's friends and colleagues described her as a loving wife and mother, further supporting her innocence. However, the detectives couldn't ignore the fact that Jessica knew about JC's possible affair. They wondered if this knowledge could have driven her to commit the crime. They questioned her about her feelings toward JC
and if she ever confronted him about the rumors. Jessica admitted she had confronted him once, but JC had denied everything. Jessica's cooperation with the investigation and lack of concrete evidence against her led the detectives to look at other suspects. While she remained a person of interest, the focus shifted to other individuals who might have had a motive to kill JC. The police were determined to find the truth. Jessica's story added another layer to the complex case, but without solid evidence, the detectives knew they had to keep looking for the real murderer. The investigation was far from over, and the detectives continued to search for answers. The second suspect in the investigation was Megan Turner, Jessica's younger sister. Megan, 28, was a freelance graphic designer living in Albany. She was outgoing and ambitious, often described as a person who sought validation and affection from older men. Megan was also known by another name, Dulcimer Geisha, her stage name as an exotic dancer at a local club. This part of her life was not widely known to her family and friends. Megan had a history of minor criminal behavior, including a few shoplifting incidents and a DUI from her early 20s. Her past raised red flags for the detectives, who wondered if her lifestyle could be connected to JC's murder. Megan often spent overnight stays at Jessica and JC's house, ostensibly to help Jessica design specialized website for her couples, but it became clear she had a closer relationship with JC than previously thought. Detectives Natalie Lawson and Paul Johnson brought Megan in for questioning. She seemed nervous but cooperative. The detectives asked her about her relationship with JC and her activities on the night of the murder. Megan admitted she was close to JC and often confided in him. She claimed she was at home alone on the night of the murder, working on a graphic design project for a local business. Megan's alibi was shaky, as she had no one to corroborate her story. The detectives probed deeper, asking about her work as Dulcimer Geisha and her criminal past. Megan became defensive but maintained her innocence. She insisted that she had nothing to do with JC's death and that their relationship was purely platonic. The detectives found evidence that Megan had been at JC's office the day before the murder, supposedly discussing a project with him behind closed doors. They also discovered text messages, described as flirty, between Megan and JC that suggested a more intimate relationship. The messages showed Megan expressing feelings of sexual attraction toward JC, who seemed to be trying to distance himself from her. Despite the evidence pointing to a possible motive, Megan continued to deny any involvement. She admitted to feeling hurt by JC's attempts to end their relationship, but claimed she would never harm him. The detectives noted her emotional responses and erratic behavior during the interrogation. The police searched Megan's apartment and found items linking her to her stage persona, but nothing directly connecting her to the murder. They continued to gather evidence and interview people who knew Megan, including colleagues at the graphic design firm and the club where she performed. As the investigation progressed, Megan remained a key suspect due to her close relationship with JC, her criminal past, and her emotional instability. However, without concrete evidence, the detectives knew they needed to keep digging. The truth behind JC's murder was still elusive, and the investigation was far from over. The third suspect in the investigation was Kevin Brown, a co-worker of JC Harris. Kevin, 40, worked in the same New York State office as JC. He was known to have a short temper and had made several complaints about JC's work style and methods. Kevin had been passed over for a promotion that JC received, causing tension between the two. Even more suspicious, Kevin was the one who discovered JC's body and the person to see him last before he died. Detectives Natalie Lawson and Paul Johnson brought Kevin in for questioning. Kevin, who was tall with a gruff demeanor, seemed defensive from the start. The detectives asked him about his relationship with JC and his feelings about not getting the promotion. Kevin admitted he was frustrated but claimed he had no reason to harm JC. Kevin said that on the night of the murder, he was at home watching a football game between the New York Giants and the Philadelphia Eagles. He provided the names of friends who could confirm his alibi. The detectives checked with Kevin's friends, who confirmed his story. However, the detectives were not convinced and decided to dig deeper. Kevin had a history of workplace conflicts. He had been involved in several arguments with other coworkers and had even received a warning for his behavior. The detectives wondered if his anger toward JC could have escalated to violence. They looked into Kevin's past and found a history of minor offenses, including a bar fight from a few years ago. The police searched Kevin's apartment for any evidence that might link him to the murder. They found several knives, but none matched the letter opener used in the crime.
They also examined his computer and phone records. Kevin had sent a few angry emails to JC in the past, but nothing that indicated a direct threat. During the interrogation, Kevin's responses were terse and defensive. He denied any involvement in JC's murder and insisted he had moved on from the promotion incident. The detectives noted his body language and tone, looking for any signs of deception. Kevin's frustration was evident, but there was no solid evidence to connect him to the crime. The detectives continued to monitor Kevin's activities and interviewed his coworkers. They found mixed opinions about him. Some described him as hardworking but temperamental, while others saw him as a potential threat due to his frequent outbursts. Despite the lack of concrete evidence, Kevin remained a person of interest in the case, but detectives knew they had to keep exploring all angles. They needed more than just suspicions to prove his involvement. As the investigation progressed, Kevin's role in JC's life and death continued to be a focal point. On October 18, 2014, 4 days after JC Harris' murder, the Albany Police Department received a crucial piece of new evidence. It was a chilly, overcast morning when a maintenance worker named Peter Willis found a blood-stained glove in a trash can behind a New York State office building where JC worked. Peter immediately reported his discovery to the police. Detectives Natalie Lawson and Paul Johnson quickly arrived at the scene. They carefully collected the glove and sent it to the forensic lab for analysis. The detectives hoped this new evidence would provide the breakthrough they needed. Later that afternoon, the forensic team, led by Dr. Amelia Cheonyang, began examining the glove. She and her team found traces of JC's blood on the glove. Along with DNA that did not belong to JC, this new DNA sample was crucial as it could potentially identify the murderer. Meanwhile, the detectives revisited the crime scene to search for any other overlooked evidence. They examined the office and surrounding areas with a fresh perspective. Using advanced forensic tools like luminol, they discovered faint blood traces leading from JC's office to the back exit of the building. This suggested that the murderer had left through that door, possibly discarding the glove along the way. The police then reviewed security footage from nearby cameras. They focused on the back exit, hoping to identify anyone who might have used it around the time of the murder. After hours of watching the footage, they spotted a shadowy figure leaving the building late at night, wearing a hoodie and gloves. Although the footage was grainy, it provided a possible lead. Back at the lab, Dr. Cheonyang compared the DNA from the glove to the samples they had from the suspects. The results came back quickly, matching Megan Turner's DNA. This was a significant breakthrough. Megan had already been a key suspect due to her close relationship with JC and her emotional instability. Detectives Lawson and Johnson decided to bring Megan in for further questioning. They confronted her with the new evidence. Megan initially denied any involvement, but as the detectives presented the DNA match, her composure began to crack. She admitted to being at the office that night but claimed she had no memory of committing the murder. Her erratic behavior and conflicting statements made the detectives even more suspicious. The new evidence shifted the focus of the investigation sharply toward Megan. The glove, the DNA match, and her proximity to JC on the night of the murder all pointed to her involvement. The detectives knew they were getting closer to solving the case, but they needed more information to secure a conviction. With the new evidence in hand, the police intensified their investigation. Determined to uncover the full truth behind JC Harris's tragic death, the community awaited answers as the detectives worked tirelessly to piece together the final parts of the puzzle. On October 22, 2014, Albany police made a significant breakthrough in the murder case of JC Harris. Megan Turner, 28, was officially identified as the murderer. The arrest followed crucial evidence linking Megan to the crime, including a DNA match from a blood-stained glove found near the scene. Megan was a freelance graphic designer and also worked as an exotic dancer under the name Dulcimer Geisha. The twist in the case came when police discovered that Jessica Turner Harris, JC's wife, had actually known about the affair between Megan and JC for months. Jessica, who always had an intense sibling rivalry with her sister, had been secretly blackmailing Megan to keep the relationship going. Jessica's aim was to gather enough evidence to ruin Megan's reputation and career. This manipulation added a shocking layer to the crime. Detectives Natalie Lawson and Paul Johnson, who had been leading the investigation, received the tip from Jessica and Megan's widowed father about Jessica's involvement. They learned that Jessica, who had always been jealous of Megan's good looks, had been using her knowledge of the affair to coerce Megan into keeping the relationship alive. This revelation was confirmed by Jessica's text messages and emails, which showed she was actively blackmailing Megan with sexually explicit pictures of her and JC. On the day of Megan's arrest, the weather in Albany was cool and overcast. Detectives Lawson and Johnson arrived at Megan's apartment, which was located in a modest area near Washington Park. Megan was at home, preparing for her evening shift at the club where she performed as Dulcimer Disha. When the police approached, Megan seemed shocked but cooperative. She was taken into custody without resistance. The arrest was widely covered by local media, including the Albany Times-Union and WNYT News Channel 13. The media reported the new twist in the case, including Jessica's role in manipulating Megan. During the interrogation, Megan admitted to killing JC in a fit of rage after he tried to end their affair. She revealed how Jessica's blackmail and manipulation had driven her to a breaking point. Megan described the murder in detail, including how she used a letter opener to stab JC multiple times and left his body in a grotesque display. Megan's confession and the new evidence provided a clear motive and detailed the tragic culmination of manipulation, obsession, and betrayal. The police were able to piece together the full story, showing how Jessica's indirect influence had pushed Megan to commit the crime. Megan Turner was charged with first-degree murder. The arrest and the unraveling of the twisted motivations behind the crime brought a new level of understanding to the case. The investigation revealed a complex web of deceit that had led to J.C. Harris's tragic death. The community and media followed the case closely as the search for justice continued. Megan Turner's trial began on December 1, 2014, at the Albany County Courthouse. The courtroom was packed with reporters and spectators eager to follow the high-profile case. Megan, 28, faced charges of first-degree murder for the killing of J.C. Harris, a case that had captured local attention. The prosecution was led by District Attorney Becca Cole, known for her clear and compelling arguments. Cole presented a strong case against Megan, using evidence like Megan's confession, the DNA from the blood-stained glove, and Jessica Turner Harris's blackmail. Cole argued that Megan's actions were driven by obsession and manipulation. She detailed how Jessica had used her knowledge of the affair to coerce Megan, adding a layer of manipulation to the crime. During the trial, Cole highlighted the severity of the crime. She described how Megan had brutally attacked JC with a letter opener, leaving his body in a grotesque display. The prosecution emphasized that Megan's violent reaction was a direct result of the emotional manipulation and stress caused by Jessica. Megan's defense attorney, Juan Carter, 50, was known for his calm and methodical approach. Carter argued that Megan had acted out of intense emotional distress rather than premeditation. He suggested that Megan's mental state, combined with the pressure from Jessica's blackmail, had led her to commit the murder in a moment of rage. Carter claimed that Megan did not intend to kill JC, but her actions were the result of extreme emotional turmoil. Throughout the trial, Megan's family remained in the courtroom, visibly distressed. They hoped for a fair outcome, but were deeply troubled by the evidence and the serious nature of the charges. JC's family, including his wife Jessica, attended the trial to seek justice and to understand the full extent of the tragedy. The jury deliberated for several hours and returned a verdict on December 9, 2014. Megan Turner was found guilty of first-degree murder. The jury's decision was based on the evidence presented, including the confession, DNA match, and the emotional impact of the blackmail on Megan. On December 15, 2014, Megan was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. The judge's decision was met with mixed reactions. Some felt the sentence was justified given the brutality of the crime, while others believed it was a harsh punishment. JC's family and friends felt a sense of closure with the verdict. They could begin to heal from the loss of JC, knowing that justice had been served. The trial had shed light on a tragic story of obsession and manipulation, emphasizing the far-reaching effects of deceit and betrayal. The case was a reminder of the importance of justice and the impact of emotional and psychological manipulation. After Megan Turner's sentencing on December 15, 2014, the lives of everyone involved in the case changed dramatically. Megan, 28, was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole for the murder of J.C. Harris. Her trial had been widely covered by local media such as the Albany Times-Union and WNYT News Channel 13. In prison, Megan faced a difficult adjustment. Known for her secretive and troubled past, she struggled with the reality of her life sentence.
Her family, who had been supportive throughout the trial, found it hard to cope with the outcome. They visited her occasionally but were deeply affected by the nature of her crime. Jessica Turner Harris, JC's wife, continued to deal with the fallout from the case. The revelation of her blackmailing Megan had caused a scandal. Jessica faced public scrutiny and criticism for her role in manipulating Megan. Despite her actions being a significant factor in the case, Jessica remained focused on her family and her work as a wedding planner. She tried to rebuild her life and restore some sense of normalcy for her son, Pikachu. Overall, the murder of J.C. Harris and Megan Turner's subsequent arrest and trial had far-reaching effects on everyone involved. The case highlighted the tragic consequences of betrayal and manipulation, underscoring the importance of addressing mental health and emotional issues. The community, while moving forward, would always remember the case that shocked Albany and the profound impact it had on their lives. In today's episode, we take you to a seemingly perfect marriage that was shattered by betrayal, secrets, and a brutal murder. This is the story of Colette Jackson, a loving wife, and the devastating consequences of uncovering a secret that would destroy everything. Colette Jackson was a 36-year-old woman who lived in Lodi, New Jersey. She was known in her community as a kind-hearted and creative person who loved helping others, especially children. Colette worked as an art teacher in a local school where she taught disadvantaged kids. She believed that art could make a difference in the lives of children who didn't have much else to turn to. Colette's classroom was always full of bright colors, paintings, and drawings. She was the type of teacher who stayed late after school to help her students finish projects or just to talk if they needed someone to listen. Her passion for art wasn't just limited to the classroom. Colette lived in a modest but cozy home with her husband, Steven Jackson. The couple had been married for nearly 10 years and appeared to have a strong and happy marriage. They often attended community events together, such as the Lodi Street Fair and the annual town Christmas parade. Colette and Stephen were well-liked by their neighbors, who often described them as a perfect couple. However, beneath the surface, Colette was dealing with more than anyone knew. In the weeks leading up to her death, Colette had been feeling increasingly stressed and anxious. She had mentioned to a close friend that she felt something was off in her marriage, but she couldn't quite put her finger on what it was. Despite her worries, Colette continued to pour herself into her work. She had recently started planning a new art program for her students, which she hoped would be ready by the fall. Colette was excited about the future and had big plans for both her career and her personal life. She had even started talking about the possibility of having children, something she and Stephen had been considering for a while. But Colette's dreams and plans would never come to fruition. She was unaware that her life was about to be tragically cut short, and the secrets that had been hidden for so long would soon come to light, changing everything. On the morning of August 14, 2013, the peaceful suburb of Lodi, New Jersey, was shaken by a horrifying discovery. At around 9:30 a.m., Angela Lagrima, a close friend of Colette Jackson, arrived at the Jackson home for their regular coffee date. Angela and Colette had been friends for years, often spending time together chatting about life, work, and their mutual love for art. That morning, Angela expected nothing more than a relaxing visit with her friend. But as she approached the house, she noticed that something seemed off. The curtains were drawn, and the front door, usually open to let in the morning light, was tightly shut. When Angela entered the living room, she was met with a scene that would haunt her forever. Colette was lying on the floor, her throat slit so deeply that her neck was nearly severed. Blood had cooled around her, staining the carpet a dark red. The sight was so shocking that Angela froze, unable to comprehend what she was seeing. After a few moments, she snapped out of her shock and frantically dialed 911, her hands shaking so badly that she nearly dropped the phone. Angela's voice was barely steady as she spoke to the emergency operator, describing what she had found. Her mind raced as she tried to make sense of what had happened. She couldn't believe that her friend, the kind and gentle Colette, had met such a violent end. The operator instructed Angela to wait outside until the police arrived, which she did, standing on the front lawn, numb and in disbelief. As she waited, Angela couldn't help but think about the last time she had seen Colette, just a few days earlier. They had met up for lunch at a local diner, talking and laughing as they always did. Colette had seemed a bit tired, but otherwise fine. Now, just days later, she was gone, and the life she had been so passionate about had been brutally taken from her. The Lodi Police Department received the 911 call at 9:45 a.m. on August 14, 2013. Within minutes, officers arrived at the Jackson home, quickly securing the area. Detective Frank Marino,
a 20-year veteran of the force known for his calm demeanor and meticulous attention to detail, led the investigation. Marino had seen his share of crime scenes, but the brutality of this one struck him immediately. As the police entered the house, they were met with the stark contrast between the cozy, lived-in space and the gruesome scene in the living room. Colette Jackson's lifeless body lay on the floor, surrounded by a pool of blood that had soaked into the carpet. Her throat had been slit with such force that it nearly severed her neck. The blood spatter on the walls and nearby furniture indicated a violent struggle. Marino took a moment to absorb the scene before instructing his team to begin the investigation. The crime scene was treated with the utmost care. The detectives worked methodically, photographing every angle of the room and collecting evidence. They noticed that nothing appeared to be out of place. No signs of forced entry or theft. Colette's purse was still on the kitchen counter, her keys next to it. Her phone was on the coffee table, untouched. This led Marino to believe that Colette had known her attacker and had not expected any danger. The murder weapon, a large kitchen knife, was found near Colette's body, covered in blood. Marino instructed the forensic team to bag the knife for further analysis. He also requested that they test the blood for fingerprints, hoping that the killer might have left a trace. The team dusted for prints on every surface, carefully lifting samples to be sent to the lab. As they continued their search, Marino noticed a small, partially open box in the corner of the room. Inside were prescription pill bottles, one of which was empty. Marino found this odd, given that Colette was not known to be on any heavy medication. He made a note to follow up on the pills, suspecting they could be a clue to the killer's identity. The medical examiner, Dr. Agnes Jiang, arrived shortly after and began her examination of Colette's body. Jiang, who had worked closely with Marino on previous cases, shared his preliminary findings. The deep, clean cut to the throat suggested a sharp, heavy blade and a strong hand. Jiang estimated that Colette had been dead for several hours, likely since the early hours of the morning. By the time the sun began to set, the police had gathered all the evidence they could find. The once warm and inviting home now felt cold and empty, marked by the traces of a life abruptly ended. Marino knew this was just the beginning. The next step was to unravel the mystery of who could have committed such a heinous act and why. Stephen Jackson, Colette's husband, was the first person the police investigated. At 40 years old, Stephen was a well-known accountant in Lodi. He was respected for his precision with numbers and was described by colleagues as dependable but quiet. Stephen had a routine life, early mornings, long hours at the office, and weekend golf outings with his best friend, Ernie Lagrima. On the surface, he seemed like a devoted husband, but Detective Frank Marino sensed that there was more to his story. When police first questioned Stephen, he appeared distraught, claiming to be devastated by his wife's death. He told officers that he had been out of the house the previous night, visiting his elderly mother in a nearby town. His alibi seemed solid at first, as his mother and a neighbor both confirmed that Stephen had been there until late in the evening. However, Marino wasn't entirely convinced. There was something off about Stephen's behavior. He wasn't just grieving. He seemed nervous, almost as if he were hiding something. As the interview continued, Stephen's demeanor shifted. When Marino began asking about his relationship with Colette, Stephen grew defensive. He insisted that their marriage was strong, despite the usual ups and downs. But when pressed about his whereabouts during the early morning hours of August 14, Stephen hesitated. He stammered slightly before repeating that he had been at his mother's house. Marino noted this hesitation, suspecting that Stephen wasn't telling the whole truth. The investigation took a turn when the police discovered Stephen's addiction to opiates. A search of the Jackson home uncovered several empty pill bottles hidden in Stephen's closet. The pills were prescribed to different names, raising suspicion that Stephen had been illegally obtaining them. When confronted with this evidence, Stephen initially denied any wrongdoing, but eventually he broke down and admitted to the addiction. He claimed that he had been struggling for years and that Colette didn't know about it. Stephen's addiction raised red flags for the investigators. They began to wonder if it was connected to Colette's murder. Could Stephen's drug habit have driven him to kill his wife, either in a moment of rage or to cover up his secret? Marino asked Stephen if he had ever gotten violent with Colette, but Stephen vehemently denied it, insisting that he loved her and would never hurt her. Despite Stephen's denials, Marino remained suspicious. The discovery of the opiates, combined with Stephen's inconsistent answers, suggested that there was more to his story. The police decided to keep a close eye on Stephen as they continued to piece together the events leading up to Colette's death. They needed more evidence before they could make an arrest, but Stephen was now firmly in their sights. Ernie Lagrima, Stephen's best friend, and a well-known lawyer in Lodi, was the second person the police focused on. Ernie, 52, had a reputation for being charismatic and outgoing, often the life of the party at local gatherings. He and Stephen had been friends since college, and their bond seemed unbreakable. They were known for their regular weekend golf outings, which they often talked about at the local diner, Jerry's Place, where they were regulars. But as Detective Frank Marino dug deeper into Ernie's life, he uncovered a shocking secret. The police brought Ernie in for questioning at the station. He appeared calm and cooperative, even joking with the officers as they began the interview. Ernie expressed disbelief at Colette's murder, claiming he couldn't imagine why anyone would want to harm her. He described her as a sweet, kind woman who was always supportive of Stephen. But as the questioning continued, Marino noticed a shift in Ernie's demeanor. When asked about his relationship with Stephen, Ernie became more guarded, carefully choosing his words. Marino pressed Ernie about the golf outings he and Stephen frequently took. Ernie insisted that they were just regular trips, nothing more than a chance to relax and unwind. But when Marino mentioned the possibility of something more going on during these trips, Ernie's composure faltered. He hesitated before admitting that he and Stephen had been involved in a sexual relationship for several years. They had kept it hidden from everyone, including their wives, fearing the consequences if it ever came to light. Ernie's confession was a bombshell for the investigators. It provided a possible motive for Colette's murder had she discovered the affair and threatened to expose them. Ernie insisted that Colette had no idea about the relationship and that Stephen would never have harmed her. He claimed that their relationship was based on love and that Stephen was deeply troubled by the murder. Despite Ernie's calm demeanor, Marino wasn't convinced. The affair added a new layer of complexity to the case, and Marino suspected that Ernie might be hiding more. The police decided to dig deeper into Ernie's background, checking his alibi for the night of the murder and looking into his phone records to see if there were any suspicious communications between him and Stephen. Ernie's charm and confidence couldn't erase the fact that he was now a key suspect in Colette's murder, and Marino knew they needed to keep a close watch on him. The third person under scrutiny was Angela Lagrima, Ernie's wife and a close friend of Colette. At 46, Angela was a dedicated teacher at a school for economically disadvantaged children, known for her kind heart and tireless efforts to support her students. She and Colette had shared many conversations about their work and their lives, often meeting for coffee at the local Starbucks. Angela was devastated by Colette's death, and at first glance, she seemed an unlikely suspect. However, as the investigation continued, the police uncovered information that made them reconsider. Angela was brought in for questioning the day after Ernie's confession. She appeared composed but visibly saddened, her voice shaking slightly as she spoke about Colette. Angela described Colette as a dear friend, someone she could always rely on. She insisted that she had no idea who would want to harm her. But when Detective Frank Marino began asking about her marriage, Angela's demeanor changed. She became more guarded, her answers shorter and less forthcoming. Marino pressed Angela about her knowledge of Ernie and Stephen's sexual relationship. To the surprise of the investigators, Angela admitted that she had known about the affair for some time. She explained that she had discovered them together about a year earlier, coming home early from a friend's wedding to find them curled up together in her bed. Angela said she was shocked at first, but decided against confronting Ernie. She said decided to accept it. She told the detectives that she believed in the saying different strokes for different folks and had chosen not to interfere. This revelation cast Angela in a new light. If she had known about the affair, could she have been motivated by jealousy or anger? Marino asked if she had ever discussed the relationship with Colette, but Angela insisted that she had kept it to herself, not wanting to hurt her friend. She claimed that she had made peace with the situation and had no reason to harm Colette. Despite Angela's calm explanation, the police couldn't ignore the possibility that her knowledge of the affair might have led to resentment. They decided to look deeper into her actions leading up to the murder. Angela's phone records and her whereabouts on the night of August 13 were closely examined. Although Angela maintained her innocence, the investigators couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to her story. As the pieces of the puzzle slowly came together, Angela remained a person of interest. Her connection to both Colette and the affair made her involvement in the case impossible to ignore. The police knew that they needed to keep pressing, hoping to uncover the truth about what really happened that night. On the morning of August 18, 2013, the investigation took a critical turn. It was a warm summer day in Lodi, with the temperature already climbing into the 80s by mid-morning. Detective Frank Marino and his team were continuing their work at the Jackson home, determined to find any overlooked clues. As the sun beat down on the quiet suburban neighborhood, Marino received a call from the forensic lab that would shift the direction of the case. The lab had completed an in-depth analysis of the blood found on the kitchen knife at the crime scene. Initially, the blood was assumed to belong solely to Colette, but the lab had discovered something unexpected, a small but distinct trace of another person's DNA mixed with the blood. Marino's heart raced as he listened to the results. The DNA belonged to Stephen Jackson. This finding was significant. It suggested that Stephen had been much closer to the crime than he had initially claimed. The presence of his DNA on the murder weapon raised serious questions about his involvement. Marino immediately contacted Stephen's lawyer to arrange a follow-up interview, but Stephen had gone into hiding, fueling the police's suspicions even further. Later that day, the police received another crucial piece of evidence. A neighbor who had been out of town during the initial investigation came forward with new information. The neighbor recalled seeing Stephen's car parked outside the Jackson home at around 2:00 a.m. on the night of the murder. This directly contradicted Stephen's earlier alibi that he had spent the night at his mother's house. With this new timeline in mind, Marino revisited the security footage from nearby homes. After hours of reviewing tapes, the team finally caught a glimpse of Stephen's car driving down the street at 1:45 a.m., just minutes before the neighbor spotted it parked at the house. This new evidence placed Stephen at the scene of the crime during the critical hours when Colette was murdered. Marino and his team felt a growing sense of urgency. The evidence was mounting against Stephen, but they knew they needed more to secure an arrest. They focused on tracking Stephen's movements after the crime, using his cell phone records to trace his location. The data showed that he had driven to a remote area outside of Lodi, where he stayed for several hours before returning home later that morning. This new evidence gave the police a much clearer picture of what had happened that night. Stephen's DNA on the knife, the neighbor's testimony, and the security footage all pointed to him being involved in Colette's death. The investigation was now centered on finding Stephen and bringing him in for questioning. On the evening of August 20, 2013, the Lodi police were closing in on their prime suspect, Stephen Jackson. The mounting evidence, including his DNA on the murder weapon, and the neighbor's testimony placing him at the scene, had made it clear that Stephen was involved in his wife Colette's brutal murder. As the sun began to set, Detective Frank Marino and his team prepared for the next step, Stephen's arrest. Stephen, a 40-year-old accountant, had always been seen as a quiet and dependable man. But behind his reserved exterior, he harbored dark secrets that would soon unravel. Stephen had been having a secret love affair with his best friend, Ernie Lagrima, for years. When Colette accidentally discovered the affair, she threatened to divorce him. Stephen, fearing the consequences, snapped. In a moment of panic and rage, he brutally slit her throat, leaving her to die in their home. To cover up his crime, Stephen bribed the medical examiner, who was also his drug dealer, to falsely rule Colette's death as natural due to her previous medical condition. The police, armed with an arrest warrant, arrived at Stephen's mother's house, where he had been hiding. It was around 7:00 p.m., and the neighborhood was quiet. As the officers approached the door, Stephen, sensing that his time was up, tried to flee through the back. But the police had anticipated this and quickly apprehended him. Stephen was handcuffed and led to a squad car, his face a mix of shock and resignation. He didn't resist. It was as if he knew the inevitable had finally caught up with him. Back at the station, Stephen was formally charged with the murder of his wife, Colette Jackson. The news of his arrests sent shockwaves through the Lodi community, especially among Colette's family and friends. They had known Stephen as a devoted husband, but the revelation of his affair and the brutal nature of the crime left them in disbelief. Colette's family, devastated by the loss and betrayal, expressed a mix of relief and sorrow. They were relieved that justice was being served, but the pain of losing Colette in such a horrific way was overwhelming. Stephen's arrest also deeply affected Ernie and Angela Lagrima. Ernie was in shock, unable to believe that his secret relationship had led to such a tragedy. Angela, who had urged Stephen to confess, was heartbroken but stood by her husband, believing that he had never intended for things to end this way. As Stephen was processed and led to his cell, Marino knew the case was far from over. The trial would be the next battle, and it was clear that this story was far from its conclusion. Stephen Jackson's trial began in January 2014, drawing significant attention from the local community and media. The courtroom was packed with reporters and onlookers, all eager to see how the case would unfold. The prosecution, led by District Attorney Linda Caruso, 45, was determined to secure a conviction. Caruso was known for her fierce dedication to justice and had built a strong case against Stephen. She argued that Stephen had committed premeditated murder driven by fear and desperation after Colette discovered his affair with Ernie Lagrima. Caruso painted a picture of a man who would stop at nothing to keep his secret life hidden, even if it meant killing his wife. The defense, led by Stephen's attorney, Michael Friedman, 50, took a different approach. Friedman was a seasoned lawyer with a reputation for taking on challenging cases. He argued that Stephen's actions were not premeditated but the result of a momentary lapse in judgment. Friedman claimed that Stephen had acted in a fit of rage and panic, not with the intent to kill. He pointed to Stephen's clean criminal record and his role as a devoted husband and father, suggesting that this crime was out of character and not deserving of a harsh sentence. Throughout the trial, Colette's family sat in the front row, their emotions visible as they listened to the testimony. Her mother, Nancy, often wept quietly, while her father, Robert, stared straight ahead, his face a mask of grief. They had lost a daughter, and now they were witnessing the man who had taken her from them try to avoid full responsibility for his actions. The jury deliberated for 3 days before reaching a verdict. On February 15, 2014, they found Stephen Jackson guilty of second-degree murder. The courtroom was silent as the verdict was read, the weight of the decision hanging heavy in the air. Caruso, satisfied with the outcome, believed that justice had been served, although she had hoped for a first-degree conviction. During the sentencing, Stephen was given 25 years to life in prison. The sentence was met with mixed reactions. Colette's family felt that it was not enough, believing that Stephen should have received a harsher punishment for the brutal way he had taken Colette's life. Ernie Lagrima, who had attended every day of the trial, looked devastated, knowing that their affair had led to such a tragic end. Angela, who had urged Stephen to confess, remained by her husband's side, but the toll of the trial and the sentencing was clear on her face. As Stephen was led away, the courtroom slowly emptied, leaving behind the echoes of a trial that had torn apart families and shaken a community. After Stephen Jackson's conviction, life changed dramatically for everyone involved. Colette's family tried to rebuild their lives, but the pain of losing her in such a violent way left a permanent scar. Her parents found solace in the support of friends and the community, but the loss of their daughter was a burden they would carry forever. They started a foundation in Colette's name, aimed at helping survivors of domestic violence, hoping to prevent others from suffering the same fate. Ernie Lagrima's life was also deeply affected. The affair that had once been his secret became public knowledge, and he faced harsh judgment from the community. Ernie, once a well-respected lawyer, found his reputation in ruins. He struggled to continue practicing law and eventually closed his practice, unable to escape the shadow of the trial. The guilt he felt over his role in the events that led to Colette's death was overwhelming. He withdrew from public life, spending most of his time in solitude, haunted by the choices he had made. Angela Lagrima, Ernie's wife, remained by his side, but their relationship was forever altered. Angela had been the one to encourage Stephen to confess, believing it was the right thing to do. However, the public scrutiny and the weight of the scandal strained their marriage. The couple moved away from Lodi, seeking a fresh start in a new town where they could leave the past behind. Despite the challenges, Angela remained committed to rebuilding their life together, though it was clear that the events had left a deep impact on both of them. Detective Frank Marino, who had led the investigation, continued his work with the Lodi Police Department. The case had been one of the most challenging of his career, and while he was proud of bringing Stephen to justice, the brutality of the crime and the pain it caused the families involved stayed with him. Marino became more vocal about the importance of mental health support for law enforcement officers, recognizing the toll that such cases could take on those tasked with solving them. Stephen Jackson, now serving his sentence in a state prison, adjusted to life behind bars. He spent much of his time in isolation, reflecting on the choices that had led him there. Stephen was a model prisoner, but the weight of his actions hung heavy on him. He occasionally received letters from Angela, who continued to check in on him, but he had little contact with the outside world. His life, once marked by a stable career and a seemingly happy marriage, was now defined by the walls of his cell and the knowledge that he had destroyed not only his life but the lives of those around him. Today we'll be delving into a chilling case set in the upscale suburb of Johns Creek, Georgia, in late August 2020. Our story involves a seemingly perfect family, dark secrets, and a twisted plot for murder. It was a hot afternoon on August 28, 2020, when the peaceful suburb of Johns Creek, Georgia, was shaken by a gruesome discovery. At around 3:00 p.m., Susan Manchego, a close friend of the Frisch family, arrived at their home for a scheduled visit. Susan, a longtime resident of Johns Creek, had known the Frisch family for years and was often involved in community and church events with Anne Frisch. As Susan walked up the driveway, she noticed that the house seemed unusually quiet. She knocked on the front door, but got no response. Feeling a bit uneasy, she tried the door and found it unlocked. Calling out for Anne and Stephen, she stepped inside. The house was eerily silent, with no sounds of the usual family activity and no sign of anyone home. Her anxiety growing, Susan decided to check the basement, where Stephen often worked on his gardening projects. As she descended the stairs, she noticed a faint, strange smell that made her heart race. At the bottom of the stairs, Susan's eyes fell on a horrific scene. There on the cold concrete floor lay Stephen Frisch, lifeless and surrounded by a pool of blood. His head was battered, and a rope was tightly wound around his neck. Next to his body was the remote control for the cable box, covered in blood. Susan's initial reaction was one of shock and disbelief. She froze for a moment, unable to process the brutal sight before her. Gathering her wits, she quickly pulled out her phone and dialed 911. Her voice was shaky as she described the scene to the operator, struggling to keep her composure. Within minutes, the sound of sirens filled the air as police and emergency responders rushed to the Frisch residence. Susan, still in shock, waited outside, watching as the once peaceful home became the center of a major crime scene investigation. The discovery of Stephen's body marked the beginning of a complex and tragic case that would leave the community of Johns Creek reeling. Stephen Frisch was a 45-year-old husband and father known for his quiet and reserved nature. He worked in software design and was highly regarded in his field for his meticulous attention to detail and innovative designs. Stephen and his family lived in Johns Creek, Georgia, an upscale suburb of Atlanta known for its friendly community and good schools. Their house, a charming two-story home, often had flowers blooming in the front yard, thanks to Stephen's love for gardening. He was passionate about his work and often spent late hours perfecting his designs. His colleagues admired him for his dedication and work ethic. Outside of work, Stephen enjoyed simple pleasures. He loved gardening and spent many weekends tending to his flowers and vegetables. He'd also enjoy playing with his two children, a 12-year-old son named Beamer and a 10-year-old daughter named Portia. Stephen's relationship with his wife, Anne, seemed picture-perfect to outsiders. They were active in their community and attended church regularly. Anne was known for organizing events and parties, often showcasing their seemingly happy family. However, behind closed doors, their marriage had its challenges. Friends and family described Stephen as kind, dependable, and somewhat introverted. He wasn't the type to seek the spotlight, preferring quiet moments with his family. Stephen's dream was to create a legacy through his architectural work and to provide a stable and loving home for his children. He often spoke about taking a family vacation to Disney World, a trip they had planned for later in the year before the COVID-19 pandemic disrupted their plans. In the days leading up to his death, Stephen had been working on a major project that he hoped would secure a significant promotion. He was excited about the future and looked forward to celebrating the completion of the project with his family. Despite the stresses of his job, Stephen always made time for his children, helping Beamer with his school science projects and reading bedtime stories to Portia. Stephen's sudden and violent death left his family and friends in shock. The community of Johns Creek mourned the loss of a man who was not only a skilled professional, but also a loving father and husband. Stephen Frisch's tragic end was a stark contrast to the peaceful life he had worked so hard to build. When the Johns Creek Police Department received Susan Manchego's frantic 911 call on August 28, 2020, they responded quickly. Detective Sheena Hayes, a seasoned investigator with over 20 years of experience, led the team. Known for her sharp instincts and methodical approach, Hayes was determined to get to the bottom of the case. The police arrived at the Frisch residence within minutes. The neighborhood was quiet, with neighbors peeking out from behind their curtains, shocked by the sudden commotion. The house was quickly cordoned off with yellow police tape, and the officers began their investigation. The basement where Stephen Frish's body was found was a scene of horror. The concrete floor was stained with blood, and Stephen's body lay in the center, surrounded by gardening tools and supplies. The remote control for the cable box, covered in blood, was found near his head, indicating it had been used to bludgeon him. The rope around his neck was tightly wound, showing signs of a violent struggle. Detective Hayes and her team meticulously combed through the crime scene. They collected fingerprints from the remote control and nearby surfaces, hoping to find a match. DNA samples were taken from the rope and any other potential evidence. The team used luminol to detect traces of blood that might have been cleaned up, illuminating the extent of the violence in a bluish glow. They also photographed every angle of the scene, ensuring no detail was overlooked. Outside the house, a crowd began to gather. Local news crews from stations like WSBT arrived, their cameras rolling as they reported on the shocking murder in the typically quiet suburb. Reporters interviewed neighbors, who expressed their disbelief and sorrow over Stephen's death. Back inside, the investigation continued. Detective Hayes noticed that despite the brutal attack, there were no signs of forced entry, suggesting the killer was someone Stephen knew and trusted. The police questioned Susan Manchego, who found the body. Still in shock, she recounted her discovery, providing crucial details about the Frisch family's recent activities. The police also looked into Stephen's recent communications. They searched his phone, computer, and social media accounts, seeking clues that might point to a motive or suspect. Emails, text messages, and recent calls were scrutinized for any hint of trouble in Stephen's life. Detective Hayes and her team worked late into the night, piecing together the events leading up to the murder. The evidence collected at the scene painted a picture of a brutal personal attack. As the investigation progressed, the police began to build a list of potential suspects, starting with those closest to Stephen. The first suspect the police focused on was Anne Frisch, Stephen's wife. At 42, Anne was known for her charismatic and outgoing personality. She was often seen at local events, organizing community gatherings and church activities. To neighbors and friends, Anne seemed like the perfect wife and mother, always smiling and full of energy. However, the police knew that appearances could be deceiving. Detective Sheena Hayes began by interviewing Anne at the police station. Anne appeared distraught, her eyes red from crying. She explained that she had been out shopping at the local Whole Foods when the murder occurred. Anne presented her receipt and mentioned that she had bumped into a friend, Martha Green, who could verify her alibi. However, the police were not entirely convinced. They needed to investigate further. The police dug into Anne's background. They discovered that despite her public persona, she had been involved in a secret love affair with a man named Nick Bromley. This revelation added a new layer of complexity to the case. Could Anne's affair have led to Stephen's murder? Detective Hayes questioned Anne about her relationship with Nick. Anne admitted to the affair and said the sex was, quote, fabulous, but insisted that she had no reason to harm Stephen. She claimed that Stephen was a good husband and father and that their marriage, while sexually unfulfilling, was stable. Anne's demeanor during the interrogation was a mix of sadness and defensiveness. She seemed genuinely heartbroken over Stephen's death, but also wary of the police's suspicions. The police also examined Anne's financial records. They found that Stephen had a substantial life insurance policy, with Anne as the primary beneficiary. This discovery raised questions about a potential financial motive. Could Anne have wanted the insurance money to start a new life with Nick? To verify Anne's alibi, Detective Hayes spoke with Martha Green. Martha confirmed that she had seen Anne at Whole Foods around the time of the murder. However, the timeline was tight, and there was still a possibility that Anne could have been involved. The police also checked surveillance footage from the store, which showed Anne shopping, but it did not conclusively prove her innocence. Despite Anne's cooperation, the evidence against her began to mount. Her affair with Nick and the potential financial motive made her a prime suspect. The police continued to monitor her closely, looking for any signs of further deception. As the investigation progressed, Anne's calm and composed exterior began to crack. She became increasingly anxious, knowing that the police were scrutinizing her at every move. The once vibrant and confident woman now appeared haunted by the shadows of her secrets. Nick Bromley, the second suspect, was Anne Frisch's lover. At 38, Nick was known for his charm and fitness. He worked as a personal trainer at a local gym and was popular among his clients.
Nick had a reputation as a ladies' man and was often seen driving his sleek BMW around Johns Creek. Detective Sheena Hayes brought Nick in for questioning. When he arrived at the police station,
Nick appeared confident and relaxed. He denied any involvement in Stephen's murder and claimed he was at the gym during the time of the crime. He even provided the names of several clients who could verify his alibi. The police decided to dig deeper into Nick's background. They discovered that Nick had a history of manipulative behavior. He had been involved in several tumultuous relationships in the past, some of which ended badly.
this information made the police suspicious. Could Nick's relationship with Anne have driven him to murder? Detective Hayes questioned Nick about his affair with Anne. Nick admitted to the relationship but insisted that he had no reason to harm Stephen. He claimed that Anne had told him she was unhappy in her marriage, but never mentioned wanting to harm her husband. Nick's demeanor during the interrogation was calm, but there was an undercurrent of arrogance in his responses. The police also looked into Nick's financial records. They found that he was struggling with debt due to living a luxurious lifestyle on only a $50,000 a year salary. This raised the possibility that Nick might have seen Stephen's life insurance money as a way out of his financial troubles. Nick, however, denied any knowledge of the insurance policy. To verify Nick's alibi, Detective Hayes spoke with his clients. Most confirmed that Nick was indeed at the gym, but there was a small window of time unaccounted for. The police checked the gym's surveillance footage, which showed Nick training clients, but there were gaps in the timeline that left room for doubt. As the investigation continued, Nick's confident exterior began to falter. He became more defensive, especially when the police confronted him with the possibility of a financial motive. The tension was palpable as Detective Hayes pressed Nick for more details about his relationship with Anne and his activities on the day of the murder. Despite Nick's protests of innocence, the police remained suspicious. His manipulative history, financial troubles, and affair with Anne painted a troubling picture. The investigation into Nick Bromley was far from over, and Detective Hayes knew that uncovering the truth would require careful and persistent probing. On August 30, 2020, at 2:00 p.m., under a sweltering summer sun, the Johns Creek Police Department uncovered a significant piece of new evidence in the murder investigation of Stephen Frisch. Detective Sheena Hayes received a call from a neighbor and friend of Anne's, Ashley Martin, who reported finding a blood-stained glove in her backyard, which was near to the Frisch residence. Detective Hayes and her team arrived at Ashley's house quickly. Ashley had been out gardening when she noticed the glove partially hidden under a bush. His curiosity turned to alarm when he saw the blood. Calmly, he called the police, knowing this could be crucial evidence. The police collected the glove and immediately sent it to the forensics lab for DNA analysis. Detective Hayes hoped this new evidence would provide a breakthrough in the case. Meanwhile, the team continued to search the area for any other items that might have been discarded by the killer. As the forensics team worked on the glove, Detective Hayes reviewed the case files, looking for connections between the suspects and the new evidence. The DNA results came back later that evening. The blood on the glove matched Stephen Frisch, and inside the glove, they found DNA from Anne Frisch. This discovery sent shockwaves through the investigation. Until now, Anne's alibi had seemed solid, with both her friend Martha Green and the surveillance footage from Whole Foods supporting her story. However, the presence of her DNA on the glove suggested otherwise. Detective Hayes called Anne back for further questioning. This time, Anne appeared more nervous. When confronted with the evidence, Anne's composure began to crumble. She claimed she had no idea how her DNA could be on the glove and suggested that someone was trying to frame her. Her voice wavered, and she seemed less confident than before. The police also checked Nick Bromley's alibi again, scrutinizing the gym's surveillance footage more closely. They discovered that during the unaccounted time, Nick had left the gym briefly, which aligned with the window of opportunity for the murder. With the new evidence pointing towards Anne and potential complicity from Nick, the police intensified their investigation. They revisited the financial records and communications between Anne and Nick, uncovering more incriminating details. Detective Hayes and her team realized they were closer to solving the case, but they needed to connect all the dots. The glove discovery added a crucial piece to the puzzle, suggesting that the murder was premeditated and that both Anne and Nick had roles in the crime. The police knew they had to act fast to gather more evidence and bring the culprits to justice. The third suspect in the investigation was Ashley Martin, a 35-year-old close to Stephen Frisch. Ashley worked with Stephen on various projects and was known for her intelligence and supportive nature. She had a reputation for being trustworthy and had often been a confidant for Stephen, especially during his marital problems.
Rumors circulated that Ashley had feelings for Stephen, but she never acted on them. On August 31, 2020, Detective Sheena Hayes called Ashley in for questioning. Ashley arrived at the police station looking composed but nervous. She recounted her professional relationship with Stephen, emphasizing their close working relationship and mutual respect. When asked about her feelings for Stephen, Ashley admitted she cared deeply for him, but insisted she would never harm him. During the interrogation, Ashley revealed a shocking secret. She was the birth mother of Stephen and Anne's 2 children. Anne was infertile, and Ashley had agreed to bear the children for them. Ashley explained that she had sex with Stephen while Anne watched, as part of their arrangement. She mentioned that the marriage between Stephen and Anne was never the same after that, and tensions had been high. Detective Hayes found Ashley's confession both surprising and intriguing. It added another layer to the complex relationship between Stephen and Anne. However, Ashley's motives were still unclear. Could her involvement in the family have driven her to murder Stephen? The police examined Ashley's alibi for the day of the murder. She claimed to have been at her office, working late on a project. The police verified her alibi by checking with her colleagues and reviewing security footage from her office building. Everything checked out, and there was no evidence placing her at the crime scene. Despite her alibi, the police continued to scrutinize Ashley's actions and communications. They reviewed her phone records and emails, looking for any signs of a conspiracy with Anne or Nick. They found several messages between Ashley and Stephen, discussing their children and work, but nothing that suggested a plot to kill him. As the investigation into Ashley progressed, the police began to see her more as a tragic figure caught in a complicated web of relationships rather than a suspect. She had no financial motive and no apparent reason to harm Stephen. Her cooperation with the police and her verified alibi gradually shifted the focus away from her. Detective Hayes and her team continued to keep Ashley under observation, but redirected their main efforts back to Anne and Nick, whose motives and actions seemed increasingly suspicious. The investigation was drawing closer to a conclusion, with each piece of evidence bringing them nearer to the truth. On September 2, 2020, the Johns Creek Police Department finally identified the murderer. Anne Frisch, Stephen's wife, was the primary suspect. Anne was 42 years old, known for her outgoing and charismatic personality. She was a social butterfly, organizing community events and church gatherings. However, beneath her charming exterior, Anne harbored dark secrets. Detective Sheena Hayes pieced together the evidence. The bloody glove with Anne's DNA, her affair with Nick Bromley, and the substantial life insurance policy. Anne and Nick had planned to kill Stephen and collect the insurance money to start a new life together. They intended to stage the murder as a burglary gone wrong, diverting suspicion from themselves. The police discovered that Anne had manipulated Nick into believing Stephen was abusive, sending Nick constant texts detailing how Stephen was torturing her with knives and fire. This twisted story convinced Nick to participate in the murder. Anne even made Nick sign a love pact, sealed with blood and other bodily fluids, to ensure his loyalty. The breakthrough came during Nick's second interrogation. Under pressure, Nick confessed that Anne had also planned to kill him after collecting the insurance money, fearing he would eventually turn on her. This shocking revelation painted Anne as a cold-blooded manipulator willing to eliminate anyone who stood in her way. On the morning of September 2, Detective Hayes and her team moved to arrest Anne. They arrived at the Frisch residence at 8 o'clock a.m. Anne was in the kitchen, preparing breakfast for her children. When the police entered, Anne seemed surprised but quickly masked her emotions. As the officers handcuffed her, Anne protested her innocence, claiming she was being framed. The neighbors watched in shock as Anne was led to the police car. The news spread quickly through Johns Creek, and the community was stunned by the revelations. Stephen's family, including his children, Beamer and Portia, were devastated. They couldn't comprehend how their mother could commit such a heinous act. In the days following Anne's arrest, Stephen's family and friends struggled to come to terms with the betrayal and loss. They were grateful that justice was being served, but heartbroken by the truth. Anne's arrest marked a significant milestone in the investigation, but it also left a trail of emotional wreckage. The once vibrant Frisch household was now a scene of sorrow and confusion. Detective Hayes knew the case was far from over, as the trial would bring more revelations and challenges. However, the arrest of Anne Frisch was a crucial step toward justice for Stephen. The trial of Anne Frisch began on November 1, 2020, and drew significant attention from both the media and the local community. The prosecution, led by Assistant District Attorney Bronco Johnson, a 45-year-old with a reputation for being tough and meticulous, argued that Ann had meticulously planned the murder of her husband, Stephen Frisch, to collect the life insurance money and start a new life with her lover, Nick Bromley. Johnson presented a compelling case detailing the evidence: the bloody glove with Ann's DNA, the life insurance policy, and Nick's confession about Ann's manipulation. He painted Ann as a cold-blooded killer who had not only planned Stephen's murder but had also intended to kill Nick to eliminate any loose ends. The defense attorney, Sarah Mintelli, a 38-year-old known for her sharp intellect and tenacity, argued that Ann was innocent and had been framed. She claimed that Nick Bromley was the real mastermind and that Ann had been manipulated by him. Mintelli highlighted Ann's community involvement and painted her as a loving mother who would never harm her husband. Throughout the trial, the courtroom was tense. Stephen's family and friends filled the seats, their faces a mix of anger and sorrow. They listened intently as witnesses testified and evidence was presented. The emotional toll on Stephen's children was evident as they watched their mother stand trial for their father's murder. Nick Bromley testified for the prosecution, detailing his affair with Ann and the plan to kill Stephen. His testimony was damning and left little doubt about Ann's involvement. The defense tried to discredit Nick, portraying him as a manipulative liar, but his detailed account and the corroborating evidence made a strong impact on the jury. After weeks of testimony and deliberation, the jury reached a verdict on December 15, 2020. Ann Frisch was found guilty of first-degree murder. The courtroom erupted with emotion as the verdict was read. Stephen's family embraced, tears streaming down their faces, while Ann sat motionless, her expression a mix of shock and resignation. The judge sentenced Ann to life in prison without the possibility of parole. The sentence was seen as a fitting punishment for the brutal and calculated nature of the crime. Ann's reaction to the sentencing was one of quiet acceptance. She did not display any outward emotion. The verdict brought a sense of closure to Stephen's family and friends. They felt justice had been served, but the pain of losing Stephen would remain with them forever. The trial's outcome also had a profound effect on the community of Johns Creek, reminding them of the darkness that can lurk behind closed doors. After Ann Frisch was sentenced to life in prison, the lives of everyone involved in the case began to change dramatically. The aftermath of the trial left a deep impact on Stephen Frisch's family, the local community, and even those who had been suspects in the case. Stephen's children, Portia and Beamer, faced a difficult adjustment. They lost their father and were now growing up without their mother, who was serving a like sentence. Stephen's sister, Rachel, stepped in to care for the children. Rachel, who lived in nearby Alpharetta, took on the responsibility of raising them. The transition was challenging, but Rachel tried to provide a stable and loving environment. Local charities, such as the North Fulton Community Charities, offered support to help the children adjust to their new life. Nick Bromley, who had testified against Ann, faced his own consequences. Although he had not been charged with the murder, the revelation of his involvement in the affair damaged his reputation and business. Clients at his gym, Fitness Together, distanced themselves from him. Nick's once thriving personal training business suffered as a result of the scandal. Ashley Martin, who had been a suspect but later cleared, also faced challenges. Although she had been exonerated, the media attention and rumors had taken a toll on her personal and professional life. Ashley chose to leave her job and moved to a new city to start fresh. She took a position at a new company and sought counseling to help her cope with the stress and public scrutiny. Detective Sheena Hayes, who led the investigation, continued her work with the Johns Creek Police Department. The case was a significant part of her career, and she used her experience to help solve other complex cases. Her commitment to justice remained strong, and she often reflected on the case's impact on her life and career. In the end, while justice had been served for Stephen Frisch, the ripples of his murder and the ensuing trial affected many lives. The community slowly healed, but the memory of Stephen and the lessons learned from the case remained a part of their lives. The tragic murder of Stephen Frisch uncovered a web of deceit and manipulation. In a seemingly perfect community, dark secrets led to a brutal crime, forever altering the lives of those involved. Today's episode takes us to a quiet, unassuming high school teacher who finds himself entangled in a web of secrecy, obsession, and ultimately, murder. This is the story of how a secret gay love affair with a student turned deadly. Carter Dressler, 29, was a well-respected high school history teacher at Richmond High School, located in the bustling heart of Richmond, Virginia. Its students knew him as Mr. Dressler, a man who always wore neatly pressed suits, usually with a patterned tie that added a touch of personality to his otherwise serious demeanor. Carter was known for his quiet, reserved nature. He wasn't the type to speak out of turn or draw attention to himself, but those who knew him best described him as kind and thoughtful. Carter had a deep love for history, particularly American history, and he made it his mission to instill that passion in his students. He often invited students to his modest one-bedroom house for overnight study sessions that went above and beyond the regular school curriculum, much to the concern of his neighbors that he was engaged in inappropriate relationships with his students. Carter's garden was his pride and joy, filled with a variety of rare and exotic plants, many of which he had cultivated over the years. Among them was the monkswood, a strikingly beautiful but deadly plant known for its deep purple flowers. Carter took great care of his garden, often spending hours each day tending to the plants. He was particularly proud of the monkswood, which he had grown from seeds he ordered from a specialized nursery. Despite the rumors that swirled around his relationships with the students, Carter was well-liked by both students and colleagues. His lessons were engaging, and he had a way of making history come alive, often incorporating current events into his teaching. In the days leading up to his death, Carter's behavior was much the same as usual. He continued to teach his classes, tend to his garden, and spend his evenings quietly reading or watching PBS NewsHour. However, there were hints of tension in his personal life that not everyone noticed. Some of his neighbors had seen him walking late at night with one of his students, Dan White, but they dismissed it as another of his mentoring sessions. No one could have imagined that just days later, Carter would be dead, the victim of a sinister plot that would shock the community. On the evening of July 15, 2017, Richmond, Virginia was enjoying a typical summer night, with the sun setting late and temperatures hovering around 80 degrees. The neighborhood where Carter Dressler lived was quiet, with most residents winding down after a long, hot day. Around 7:30 p.m., Lisa Hall, Carter's next-door neighbor, decided to check on him. Lisa was a single mother in her late 30s, known for being outspoken and a bit nosy, but she genuinely cared about her neighbors, especially Carter, whom she considered a close friend. Lisa had noticed that Carter hadn't been out in his garden all day, which was unusual. He was usually outside by early morning, tending to his plants, especially on weekends. As she walked across her lawn, Lisa couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. She knocked on Carter's front door, but there was no answer. The house seemed eerily still. Concerned, Lisa decided to check the backyard, where Carter often spent his evenings reading or working in the garden. As she rounded the corner of the house, she saw Carter sitting on his favorite porch chair, a book in his lap, and a cup of tea on the small table beside him. But something was off. Carter wasn't moving. His head was slumped forward, and the book he loved so much had fallen from his hands. Lisa's heart raced as she approached him, calling his name. When he didn't respond, she reached out to shake his shoulder, only to be met with the cold, stiff feeling of his skin. Panic set in, and she quickly realized that something was terribly wrong. Lisa ran back to her house and called 911, her voice shaking as she tried to explain the situation. The dispatcher instructed her to stay calm and wait for the authorities to arrive. Lisa stood on her porch, eyes fixed on Carter's lifeless body, as she waited for the police. She couldn't believe what was happening. Just the day before, she had seen Carter in his garden, smiling and waving as she drove past. Now he was dead, and she was the one who had found him. The first officers arrived within minutes, quickly securing the scene and confirming Lisa's worst fears. Carter Dressler was dead. The once peaceful evening had turned into a nightmare, and the quiet neighborhood was soon filled with the flashing lights of police cars and the murmurs of concerned neighbors. The police arrived at Carter Dressler's home shortly after Lisa Hall's frantic 911 call on July 15, 2017. The first officers on the scene were Richmond police detectives Laura Colley and Tom Keller. Colley, a seasoned investigator in her mid-40s, was known for her sharp intuition and meticulous attention to detail. Keller, slightly younger and more methodical, was her trusted partner. Both detectives had handled numerous cases in Richmond, but something about this one felt different from the moment they stepped onto the property. As they approached the back porch where Carter's body was found, Colley immediately noticed the eerie stillness of the scene. The garden, usually vibrant and full of life, seemed almost haunting in the fading evening light. The air was thick with the scent of flowers,
but the sweet aroma did little to mask the unsettling presence of death. Carter's body sat unnaturally still in his chair, his head slumped forward and his eyes closed as if he had simply fallen asleep while reading. The detectives carefully surveyed the area, making note of the details. The book in Carter's lap was a history text, one of his favorites, open to a chapter about the American Revolution. Beside him on the small table was a cup of tea, now cold. Colley observed the tea more closely, noting the faint remnants of a powdery substance at the bottom of the cup. It was an immediate red flag, suggesting that something had been added to the tea. The crime scene itself was surprisingly tidy, with no signs of a struggle. There was no blood, no overturned furniture, nothing that indicated a violent altercation. This led the detectives to suspect that Carter's death might not have been an accident. Colley and Keller were aware of Carter's reputation as a reserved but well-liked teacher, making it hard to believe that anyone would want to harm him. But they also knew that the quietest lives often hid the darkest secrets. The detectives called in the forensic team, who quickly began their work, dusting for fingerprints and collecting samples. They took the teacup and its contents as evidence, as well as a few leaves from the monkshood plant in the garden, which Colley had identified as potentially poisonous. The forensic team also examined Carter's body, noting the signs of poisoning: pale skin, a bluish tint to the lips, and the characteristic rigidity of a body that had been dead for several hours. As the investigation continued into the night, Colley and Keller began piecing together what had happened. The lack of visible wounds and the presence of the poisonous plant led them to believe that Carter's death was the result of foul play, likely involving someone who knew him well enough to plan the murder carefully. With this in mind, the detectives prepared to question the people closest to Carter, starting with his neighbors and the students who frequently visited his home. The first person the police questioned in connection with Carter Dressler's death was Dan White, an 18-year-old student at Richmond High School. Dan was known for his charm and intelligence, often dazzling teachers and classmates with his sharp wit. He was a star on the school's debate team, frequently leading them to victory in competitions across Virginia. Despite his success, those close to him knew Dan had a darker side. He was highly possessive, especially in his sexual relationships, where rumors swirled he was interested in violent sex and could be obsessive to the point of controlling. Detectives Laura Colley and Tom Keller brought Dan in for questioning the morning after Carter's body was discovered. They met him in a small, windowless interrogation room at the Richmond Police Department. Dan arrived looking calm, almost indifferent, wearing a neatly pressed polo shirt and jeans. His demeanor was relaxed, as if he had nothing to hide. Colley started the interrogation by asking Dan about his relationship with Carter. Dan admitted they were close, describing Carter as a mentor who had helped him through many difficult times. He said they often spent time together outside of school discussing history and preparing for upcoming debate competitions. Dan spoke fondly of Carter, painting a picture of a supportive, almost fatherly figure in his life. But as the questioning continued, Colley shifted the focus to Dan's whereabouts on the night of Carter's death. Dan claimed he had been home all evening, working on a new debate strategy for an upcoming tournament. He said he hadn't seen Carter for a few days and was shocked to hear about his death. However, Colley noticed a slight change in his demeanor when she asked about Carter's other students, particularly those who also visited his one-bedroom home for overnight study sessions. Dan's answers became more clipped, and his previously relaxed posture grew tense. The detectives pressed Dan on his feelings toward Carter, subtly hinting at the possibility of jealousy. Dan's responses became more defensive, and at one point he raised his voice, insisting he had nothing to do with Carter's death. Keller, observing Dan's body language, noted the sudden shift from calm to agitated, a sign that Dan might be hiding something. When asked directly if he had ever been jealous of Carter's close relationships with other students, Dan hesitated before giving a firm no. But the hesitation didn't go unnoticed. Colley and Keller exchanged a glance, realizing they had touched a nerve. Despite his outward calm, Dan's reaction suggested there might be more to his relationship with Carter than he was willing to admit. As the interrogation ended, Dan maintained his innocence, but the detectives left the room with more questions than answers. They knew Dan's charm and intelligence made him a skilled manipulator, and his connection to Carter was deeper and more complex than he was letting on. The possibility that Dan's obsession with Carter had turned deadly couldn't be ignored. Next, the police turned their attention to Lisa Hall, Carter Dressler's 38-year-old neighbor. Lisa was known in the Richmond neighborhood for her outspoken nature and fiery temper. She lived alone with her teenage daughter, Karoma,
and had earned a reputation as someone who was always in other people's business. Despite this, Lisa had a soft spot for Carter. They had been close friends for years, often chatting over the fence that separated their yards. She admired Carter's dedication to teaching and his love for gardening, but she had long been suspicious of his relationships with male students. Detectives Laura Cawley and Tom Keller invited Lisa to the station for questioning. When she arrived, Lisa looked nervous but composed, wearing a simple blouse and jeans. Cawley began by asking Lisa about her friendship with Carter. Lisa spoke warmly about him, mentioning how they often exchanged gardening tips and talked about the latest news from the Richmond Times-Dispatch. However, when the conversation shifted to Carter's relationships with his students, Lisa's tone changed. She admitted that she had been worried about Carter's behavior, especially his habit of inviting students to a small one-bedroom home for overnight stays. Lisa confessed that she had confronted Carter about his creepy relationships with the students several times. She believed he was seeking their approval in unhealthy ways, possibly by offering them sex, though she stopped short of accusing him of assaulting them. Lisa's concern was that Carter might be emotionally manipulating the boys for the love that he desperately needed, and she had repeatedly urged him to stop. Despite her warnings, Carter continued his creepy relationships with his students, and Lisa's frustration grew. When Cawley asked Lisa where she was on the night of Carter's death, Lisa stated that she had been home with her daughter, watching a rerun of NCIS New Orleans. She mentioned that she had seen Carter earlier in the day, but their interaction was brief. She didn't notice anything unusual, but admitted that she had felt uneasy for weeks, sensing that something was wrong between Carter and Dan White, one of the students he was closest to. As the questioning continued, Lisa's emotions bubbled to the surface. She became visibly upset, tears welling in her eyes as she spoke about Carter's death. She insisted that despite her concerns, she never wished him harm and was heartbroken over his murder. Her raw emotions struck the detectives, but they remained focused, probing for any signs that Lisa might have been more involved than she was letting on. By the end of the interrogation, Lisa's alibi seemed solid, but her deep concern over Carter's relationships couldn't be ignored. Cawley and Keller left the interview with a clearer picture of Lisa's frustrations and her complicated feelings toward Carter. Though she was upset, the detectives still had to consider the possibility that Lisa's worries had escalated into something more dangerous. On July 20, 2017, 5 days after Carter Dressler's body was found, the Richmond Police Department received a critical piece of new evidence that would change the direction of the investigation. It was a hot, humid afternoon with temperatures soaring into the mid-90s, typical for a Virginia summer. Detective Laura Cawley was at her desk going over notes from previous interviews when a forensic technician entered the office with a report in hand. The technician, Mike Harris, handed Cawley the report with a serious expression. "You're going to want to see this," he said. The report detailed the results of the toxicology tests performed on the tea found at Carter's home. The test confirmed that the tea had been laced with aconite, a rare and highly toxic plant also known as monk's hood, which was found growing in Carter's garden. Aconite is notoriously difficult to detect, and its effects can be mistaken for natural causes unless specifically tested for. Cawley quickly called her partner, Tom Keller, and they reviewed the findings together. The presence of aconite confirmed their suspicions that Carter's death was not an accident. More importantly, it pointed directly to someone who had knowledge of plants and access to Carter's garden. This led the detectives to revisit their list of suspects, particularly focusing on those who had been close to Carter and might have known about the deadly properties of aconite. The detectives decided to search Carter's home again, this time with a more focused approach. They combed through his belongings, looking for anything that might suggest someone had been tampering with his garden or his food. In the process, they discovered a small locked box hidden in Carter's bedroom closet. Inside, they found a collection of sexually explicit letters and notes from his students, most of which were from Dan White. The letters were graphic and intensely personal, confirming a secret consensual sexual relationship between Carter and Dan that had become increasingly strained in recent weeks. The tone of the letters suggested that Dan had grown more possessive and jealous, often expressing anger and frustration over Carter's possible sexual relationships with other boys. One letter, in particular, stood out. It was dated just a few days before Carter's death and hinted at a possible breakup. Dan wrote about feeling abandoned and betrayed, stating, "If you're gonna bleep some other hot young thing, I don't want you alive." This discovery shifted the investigation's focus sharply back to Dan White.
The new evidence not only confirmed a motive, but also placed Dan at the center of the investigation. Colley and Keller knew they needed to bring Dan back in for questioning, this time with the new evidence in hand. The stage was set for a final confrontation, and the detectives were determined to uncover the truth. With the new evidence pointing strongly toward Dan White, the detectives decided to investigate one final suspect, Officer Charlie Brennan, a 47-year-old Richmond police officer. Brennan lived across the street from Carter Dressler and was initially in charge of the investigation before being removed due to his personal connection to the victim. Brennan was known for his no-nonsense attitude and strong sense of justice, but it was his secret sexual relationship with Carter that now made him a person of interest. Detectives Laura Colley and Tom Keller approached Brennan carefully. Given his position within the police force, they knew they had to tread lightly. They requested to speak with Brennan at his home, a modest brick house on a quiet, tree-lined street. When they arrived, Brennan greeted them with a stoic expression, clearly aware that the investigation was closing in on him. The detectives began by asking Brennan about his relationship with Carter. Brennan admitted that they had become close over the years, initially bonding over their shared interest in history. What began as casual conversations about Civil War battles and local Richmond history soon deepened into a series of secret sexual liaisons. Brennan spoke of Carter with a mix of fondness and regret, acknowledging that their relationship had to be kept hidden due to the potential scandal it could cause. When Colley asked Brennan if he had ever suspected anyone of wanting to harm Carter, he hesitated. Brennan admitted that he had been worried about Carter's habit of sleeping with his male students for quite some time, ever since Carter offered to share some of his boy bank with Brennan. He had also noticed Dan White's increasingly possessive behavior and had even warned Carter to be cautious. Brennan's paternal instincts towards Carter were strong, and he confessed that he had grown suspicious of Dan's intentions, particularly in the weeks leading up to Carter's death. Colley and Keller then shifted the conversation to the night of Carter's murder. Brennan stated that he had been at home, working late on some case files. He claimed he had no idea Carter was in danger and was devastated when he learned of his death. However, Colley noted the subtle change in Brennan's demeanor when they mentioned the aconite found in Carter's tea. Brennan's face tightened and his answers became more clipped, as if he was carefully choosing his words. Despite his composed exterior, the detectives could sense Brennan's unease. They asked if he had ever handled aconite or knew of its deadly properties. Brennan responded that he was familiar with the plant, having learned about it during a case years ago, but insisted he had never used it. However, the tension in the room was palpable, and Colley and Keller couldn't shake the feeling that Brennan was hiding something. As the interview concluded, the detectives were left with more questions than answers. Brennan's connection to Carter and his knowledge of aconite made him a viable suspect, but without concrete evidence, they couldn't make an arrest. However, his behavior during the interview only deepened their suspicion, and they knew they couldn't rule him out just yet. On July 22, 2017, Richmond detectives Laura Colley and Tom Keller finally identified the person responsible for Carter Dressler's death. The investigation had been intense, with multiple suspects and conflicting evidence. But the new information from Carter's letters, combined with forensic evidence, led them to one clear conclusion. Dan White, Carter's 18-year-old student, neighbor, and sexual partner, was the murderer. Dan had been involved in a secret sexual relationship with Carter for over a year. While the relationship was consensual and full of intense passions, it became increasingly toxic as Dan grew more possessive and controlling. The letters found in Carter's lockbox revealed Dan's escalating jealousy and fear of losing Carter to, quote, hotter boys. The final letter, written just days before Carter's death, hinted at a potential breakup, which Dan couldn't accept. It was clear that Dan's obsessive love had turned deadly. The detectives knew they had to act quickly to prevent Dan from fleeing. On the afternoon of July 22, they arrived at Dan's home with an arrest warrant. It was a hot, sunny day with temperatures hovering around 95 degrees. Dan was at home alone, watching an adult movie on his laptop when the detectives knocked on his door. Colley and Keller calmly informed Dan of the charges against him, murder in the first degree. Dan's reaction was one of shock. He stood frozen in the doorway, his face pale and his eyes wide. He stammered out a denial, but the evidence against him was overwhelming. As the detectives handcuffed Dan and led him to the police car, he began to cry. His tears quickly turned to anger as he realized the gravity of the situation. He yelled at the detectives, accusing them of ruining his life,
and insisting that he had only wanted to protect Carter from, quote, the horrors of life and love. But his words fell on deaf ears. The detectives had heard similar stories before. The evidence was clear. Dan had used aconite from Carter's garden to poison him, slipping it into his tea during one of their evening meetings. Back at the police station, Dan's confession was recorded. He admitted to poisoning Carter but claimed it was an act of love. He said he couldn't bear the thought of losing Carter to someone else and believed that death was the only way to keep him forever. Dan's twisted sense of love and control had driven him to commit murder. The news sent ripples through the community, where Carter had been a respected teacher and neighbor. The arrest brought a sense of closure, but it also left many unanswered questions about the nature of the relationship between Carter and Dan and how it had gone so tragically wrong. Dan White's trial for the murder of Carter Dressler began on August 7, 2017 in the Richmond Circuit Court. The case drew considerable media attention, with local news outlets covering every development. The courtroom was packed with spectators, including Carter's family and friends, all eager to see justice served. The prosecution was led by Assistant Commonwealth Attorney Rebecca Owens, a 45-year-old lawyer known for her dedication and sharp legal mind. Owens presented a compelling case against Dan. She highlighted the evidence, including the letters from Carter's lockbox and the toxicology report confirming the presence of aconite in Carter's tea. Owens argued that Dan's obsession and jealousy were the driving forces behind the murder. She described how Dan had poisoned Carter in a final act of control and rage, emphasizing the premeditated nature of the crime. In his defense, Dan was represented by Desmond J. Carter, a 42-year-old attorney with a reputation for handling difficult cases. Carter argued that Dan had not intended to kill Carter, but was driven to a breaking point by emotional turmoil. He portrayed Dan as a troubled young man who had acted out of a distorted sense of love. The defense's strategy was to mitigate Dan's responsibility, suggesting that his actions were the result of an emotional breakdown rather than cold-blooded murder. Throughout the trial, Carter's family sat in the front row, their faces a mix of grief and disbelief. They listened as the details of Carter's relationship with Dan were laid bare. Emotions ran high as Carter's family members took the stand, describing the impact of his death on their lives and the community. Their testimony painted a picture of Carter as a kind and dedicated teacher who was deeply loved and respected. On August 15, 2017, after a week of intense arguments and emotional testimony, the jury returned with a verdict. Dan White was found guilty of first-degree murder. The decision came as a relief to Carter's family, who had been waiting for this moment with bated breath. During sentencing on August 22, Dan was given a life sentence without the possibility of parole. The judge, noting the premeditated nature of the crime and the suffering inflicted on Carter's family, felt this sentence was appropriate. The courtroom was filled with a sense of grim satisfaction. While the sentence could never bring Carter back, it provided a measure of justice and closure for those he left behind. The trial had a profound effect on the community. Richmond was shaken by the revelation of the secret relationship and the murder that followed. Carter's students and neighbors mourned the loss of a beloved figure while grappling with the shock of the crime. The case served as a stark reminder of the dark side of human relationships and the devastating consequences of unchecked jealousy and obsession. After Dan White's sentencing on August 22, 2017, the community of Richmond began to pick up the pieces from the shocking events. The trial had left a lasting impact on everyone involved, from Carter Dressler's family to his students and the local community. Dan White's life, on the other hand, took a drastic turn. He was transferred to a maximum security prison in Virginia. There, he faced a difficult reality. While he was in protective custody due to the high-profile nature of his case, life behind bars was harsh. Dan's family struggled to cope with the fallout from the trial. His parents, who had been supportive throughout the proceedings, found themselves under intense scrutiny from the media and community. They moved away from Richmond to avoid the constant attention and to try and rebuild their lives away from the public eye. In the years following the trial, the case of Carter Dressler remained a topic of discussion in Richmond. It served as a sobering reminder of how deeply personal relationships can impact lives and how unchecked emotions can lead to tragic outcomes. The community continued to honor Carter's memory, ensuring that his story would be remembered not only for the tragedy but also for the positive impact he had on those around him. Jessica Jessie Harper was a 29-year-old woman living in Athens, Georgia. She worked as a barista at Starbucks, where she was known for her friendly smile and artistic coffee creations. Jessie had a vibrant personality and loved to bring joy to those around her. She often worked on art projects in her free time, dreaming of opening her own gallery someday. Jessie lived in a small apartment close to downtown Athens, where she enjoyed the lively atmosphere and community events. Jessie had a close-knit group of friends and was well-liked by her coworkers. She was sociable, often organizing get-togethers and participating in local art shows. Her friends described her as creative and free-spirited, someone who could light up any room. Jessie was also involved in various local activities, such as volunteering at the animal shelter and attending music festivals. Born and raised in Athens, Jessie attended Clark Central High School and later took some art classes at the University of Georgia. Her family included her elderly husband, Dan Harper, a retired photography professor, and her younger brother, Mark Harper, who lived in Boston. Jessie's relationship with Dan was complicated by their 63-year age difference and Dan's health problems. Despite these challenges, Jessie remained dedicated to her marriage. In the days before her death, Jessie was busy with her usual activities. She had just finished a large mural at a local cafe and was excited about its positive reception. She was also preparing for an art exhibition at a nearby gallery, where she planned to showcase her latest pieces. Jessie spent her days working at Starbucks, catching up with friends, and creating art. She often talked about her future plans and dreams, showing her optimistic outlook on life. However, Jessie's personal life was not without its difficulties. She was involved in a love triangle with her husband, Dan, and her close friend and coworker, Jess Owens. This complicated relationship added stress to Jessie's life, though she tried to keep a positive attitude. On the morning of August 15, 2010, Jessie Harper's life would come to a tragic end. Her vibrant personality and creative spirit were well known in Athens, and her death shocked the community. Jessie was a beloved figure whose dreams and kindness left a lasting impact on those who knew her. On the morning of August 15, 2010, Athens, Georgia was enjoying a clear, sunny day with temperatures in the mid-70s. The town was quiet, with many people still recovering from the excitement of the recent Twilight Criterium, a popular annual bike race. At 8:30 a.m., Patty Johnson, Jessie's next-door neighbor, began to worry. She hadn't seen Jessie in a few days, which was unusual since they often chatted in the hallway. Patty, a 45-year-old schoolteacher, decided to check on Jessie. She knocked on the door, but got no answer. Knowing Jessie often left a spare key with her, Patty decided to use it. As she opened the door, a sense of dread filled her. The apartment was eerily quiet, with the only sound being the hum of the air conditioner. Patty called out Jessie's name, but got no response. As Patty walked into the living room, she made a horrifying discovery. Jessie was lying on the floor, motionless. A silk scarf was tightly wrapped around her neck, and her face was pale. Shocked and terrified, Patty immediately backed out of the apartment and dialed 911, her hands shaking. Within minutes, emergency services arrived at the scene. Paramedics quickly confirmed that Jessie was dead. The police arrived shortly after. Patty was visibly shaken as she spoke with them. She described Jessie as a cheerful and friendly neighbor who had never shown any signs of trouble. Patty's account was filled with sadness and disbelief. She could not understand who would want to hurt Jessie. The news of Jessie's death quickly spread through the community. The local newspaper, the Athens Banner-Herald, reported on the tragic incident, and residents were stunned. Jessie's co-workers at Starbucks were particularly devastated, as they had considered her a close friend. The discovery of Jessie's body marked the beginning of a complex investigation that would soon reveal the dark secrets of those closest to her. On the morning of August 15, 2010, the Athens Police Department swiftly responded to the 911 call about Jessie Harper's death. Detective Michael Reynolds and Officer Sarah Thompson led the investigation. Detective Reynolds, known for his calm demeanor and methodical approach, was a veteran in the department. Officer Thompson, respected for her keen attention to detail, was relatively new but already showed promise. Upon arriving at Jessie's apartment, the police immediately secured the area. The living room where Jessie's body was found was unsettling. The sight of the young woman with a silk scarf tightly wrapped around her neck was a chilling image.
The room itself was mostly tidy, but there were signs of a struggle, an overturned coffee table, and a few scattered cushions. The apartment showed no signs of forced entry, suggesting Jessie knew her attacker. Detective Reynolds began examining the scene, carefully noting every detail. Officer Thompson started taking photographs and collecting evidence. They found fingerprints on the silk scarf and various surfaces in the apartment.
but police also took samples for DNA testing. The crime scene investigators dusted for prints, collected fibers, and looked for any other potential clues that could point to the murderer. The Athens police used the latest forensic tools available in 2010. They brought in a luminol spray to check for any hidden bloodstains and used an alternate light source to find fibers or hairs that might not be visible to the naked eye. They also checked Jesse's phone and computer for any recent communications that could provide clues. As the investigation unfolded, Detective Reynolds and Officer Thompson interviewed neighbors and friends. Karen Johnson, who had found Jesse, described the victim as a friendly and cheerful neighbor. She mentioned Jesse's complicated personal life, including her relationships with her husband, Dan Harper, and her friend, Jessica Jess Owens. The investigators also spoke with Jesse's coworkers at Starbucks. They described Jesse as a kind and creative person, but hinted at some recent tension between her and Jess Owens. This information helped the police narrow down their list of suspects. Throughout the day, the police worked diligently to gather all possible evidence from the crime scene. The discovery of Jesse Harper's body had shaken the community, and the police were determined to find her killer. Detective Reynolds and Officer Thompson knew that solving this case would require piecing together the puzzle of Jesse's life and relationships. Dan Harper, the first suspect, was 92 years old and Jesse's husband. A retired photography professor at the University of Georgia, Dan was famous for his work during the Korean War for Life magazine. He met Jesse when she was 19, and they quickly started dating, despite the 63-year age difference. Dan was known for his adventurous spirit and charm, but his intense nature sometimes led to possessiveness. His frequent hospital visits for health issues created tension in their marriage, adding to the complications of their relationship. The police brought Dan in for questioning at the Athens Police Department. Detective Michael Reynolds led the interrogation, wanting to understand Dan's perspective and his possible involvement in Jesse's death. Dan appeared heartbroken and tired as he sat down with the detectives. His eyes were filled with sadness, and he spoke softly but firmly, denying any involvement in the crime. Dan described his relationship with Jesse as loving but strained due to his health problems. He admitted to feeling jealous at times, especially when Jesse spent time with her friends or worked late at Starbucks. However, he insisted that he would never harm her. He told the detectives about his last interaction with Jesse, which had been a simple conversation about her upcoming art show. Dan's alibi for the night of the murder was his hospital stay, where he was being treated for a chronic illness. The detectives checked Dan's alibi and found it solid. Hospital records confirmed he was admitted the night Jesse was killed. Despite this, they continued to probe for more information, hoping to uncover any details that could help them understand Jesse's life and potential threats. During the interrogation, Dan remained calm but visibly distraught. He answered the questions patiently, often pausing to collect his thoughts. He expressed deep sorrow over Jesse's death and a strong desire to see her killer brought to justice. Dan's love for Jesse was evident, and its heartbreak seemed genuine. As the investigation continued, the police turned their attention to other suspects, but Dan Harper remained a person of interest due to his close relationship with the victim and the complexities within their marriage. They hoped further investigation would reveal more about who could have wanted Jesse dead. The second suspect in Jesse Harper's murder was Jessica Jess Owens, a 27-year-old co-worker and close friend of Jesse. Jess Owens worked with Jesse at Starbucks, where their friendship blossomed into a secret sexual relationship. Jess was known for her warm and friendly personality, but she also struggled with feelings of insecurity, especially about Jesse's relationship with her husband, Dan Harper. On August 16, 2010, the police brought Jess Owens in for questioning at the Athens Police Department. Detective Michael Reynolds and Officer Sarah Thompson led the interrogation. Jess appeared nervous as she entered the room, her eyes red from crying. She sat down and took a deep breath before the questioning began. Jess described her relationship with Jesse as more than just friendship. She admitted they had been involved in a sexual relationship for several months. She spoke about how much she loved Jesse and how their bond had grown stronger over time. Jess explained that while she knew about Jesse's marriage to Dan, she believed Jesse would eventually leave him for her. When asked about the night of the murder, Jess said she had been at home, feeling unwell. She stated that she had not seen Jesse since their shift together at Starbucks the day before. However, her alibi was weak, as no one could confirm her whereabouts during the crucial hours. Detective Reynolds and Officer Thompson pressed further, asking Jess about any recent arguments or conflicts with Jesse. Jess admitted they had argued a few days before the murder. She confessed that she was jealous and frustrated about Jesse's relationship with Dan, but she insisted she would never harm Jesse. Jess was visibly emotional, her voice trembling as she spoke about how much she missed Jesse. The police searched Jess's apartment and belongings for any evidence linking her to the crime. They found a few items that raised suspicion, including a silk scarf similar to the one used to strangle Jesse. This discovery made Jess a prime suspect, despite her emotional pleas of innocence. Jess's reaction to the interrogation was a mix of sorrow and anxiety. She was cooperative but clearly distressed, repeatedly expressing her love for Jesse and her disbelief that she was a suspect. The police noted her emotional volatility and the contradictions in her statements, which added to their suspicion. As the investigation progressed, the detectives kept Jess Owens under close scrutiny. They knew her complicated relationship with Jesse and her emotional instability could be key to solving the case. Jess remained a central figure in their search for the truth behind Jesse Harper's tragic death. On August 20, 2010, 5 days after Jesse Harper's murder, the weather in Athens, Georgia, was hot and humid. The police were still hard at work trying to solve the case. That morning, a breakthrough came when a maintenance worker found a small piece of paper in the hallway near Jesse's apartment. The paper appeared to be a torn note with handwriting on it. He quickly handed the note over to Detective Michael Reynolds and Officer Sarah Thompson, who were still investigating the case. The note read, "Meet me at 8. We need to talk. Jay." The detectives believed the note was written by Jess Owens. The handwriting was similar to Jess's, and the detectives knew that J was how Jess signed her notes to Jesse. This new piece of evidence shifted the focus back to Jess Owens. The note suggested that she had planned to meet Jesse on the night of the murder. Detective Reynolds and Officer Thompson re-interviewed Jess Owens, presenting her with the note. Jess looked shocked and admitted that she had written the note, but insisted she had not met Jesse that night. Jess's reaction was a mix of fear and confusion. She repeated her earlier statements about being at home and feeling unwell. Despite her claims, the detectives felt they were getting closer to the truth. They decided to take a closer look at Jess's phone records and text messages. They found several messages between Jess and Jesse, showing a pattern of arguments and reconciliation. The last message from Jess to Jesse read, "I'll be there at 8. We need to sort this bleep out." The detectives also revisited the evidence collected from Jess's apartment. They re-examined the silk scarf they had found, comparing it to the one used to strangle Jesse. Forensic tests showed that both scarves were from the same set, a limited edition sold at a local boutique where both women had shopped. With this new evidence, the detectives were more convinced than ever that Jess Owens was hiding something. They continued to press her, hoping to uncover the full truth about what had happened on the night of August 15. The discovery of the torn note was a significant step forward in the investigation, bringing the police closer to solving the mystery of Jesse Harper's tragic death. The third suspect in Jesse Harper's murder was Maximo Lorona Rodriguez, a 35-year-old local gang leader. Known for his violent past and current involvement in criminal activities, Maximo had a reputation for being both ambitious and controlling. He had a tumultuous relationship with Jess before they broke up, but he never fully moved on and continued to harbor strong feelings for her. On August 21, 2010, the Athens Police Department decided to bring Maximo in for questioning. The weather that day was sweltering, with temperatures soaring into the high 80s. Detective Michael Reynolds and Officer Sarah Thompson knew that interviewing Maximo would be challenging given his criminal background and notorious temper. Maximo arrived at the police station, his demeanor guarded and intimidating. Detective Reynolds started the questioning by asking about his relationship with Jesse Harper. Maximo spoke in a low, firm voice, describing how he and Jesse had once been close but had drifted apart after she got married. He admitted that he was still upset about their breakup and had difficulty letting go, but he denied having any involvement in her death. The detectives pressed Maximo about his whereabouts on the night of the murder. Maximo claimed he had been with his gang members at a local bar, The Globe, a well-known spot in downtown Athens. He provided names of several individuals who could vouch for him. Despite his alibi, Detective Reynolds and Officer Thompson were skeptical. They knew that Maximo's gang could easily cover for him if he was involved in a crime. The police checked Maximo's alibi by interviewing patrons and staff at the Globe. Some confirmed seeing him there, but the timeline was fuzzy, leaving gaps that could not be accounted for. Additionally, the police found no physical evidence linking Maximo directly to the crime scene, but his volatile nature and unresolved feelings for Jesse kept him under suspicion. Maximo's reaction during the interrogation was a mix of anger and frustration. He was cooperative to an extent, but became increasingly agitated when the detectives suggested he might have a motive for killing Jesse. He vehemently denied any wrongdoing, insisting he was being targeted because of his past. Despite Maximo's strong denials, the detectives remained cautious. They knew that his history of violence and his lingering emotions for Jesse made him a potential suspect. They continued to gather evidence and monitor his activities, hoping to find something that could either incriminate or exonerate him. On August 25, 2010, the Athens Police Department made a breakthrough in the Jesse Harper murder case. The day was hot and sultry, with temperatures reaching into the low 90s. Detective Michael Reynolds and Officer Sarah Thompson were going through the evidence once again when it received the final forensic report. The report confirmed that the fingerprints on the silk scarf used to strangle Jesse matched those of Jess Owens. With this crucial piece of evidence, police were now confident that Jess Owens was the murderer. Jess, 27, had been Jesse's co-worker and secret lover. She was known for her friendly and sensitive nature, but struggled with jealousy and insecurity about Jesse's relationship with her husband, Dan Harper. Jess's emotions had spiraled out of control, leading her to commit the crime. Jess's motive was a combination of love, fear, and desperation. She couldn't bear the thought of losing Jesse to Dan. On the night of the murder, Jess went to Jesse's apartment, hoping to resolve their issues. However, the conversation quickly turned into a heated argument. In a fit of rage and desperation, Jess grabbed one of Jesse's silk scarves and strangled her. Detective Reynolds and Officer Thompson reviewed the timeline and evidence carefully before making their move. They knew they needed to arrest Jess before she could flee or destroy more evidence. The police arrived at Jess's apartment in the late afternoon, when the heat of the day had started to wane. Jess Owens was taken by surprise when the officers knocked on her door. She opened it, looking anxious and tired. The detectives informed her of the charges and placed her under arrest. Jess's reaction was a mix of shock and resignation. She didn't resist and was quietly taken to the police station. News of Jess's arrest spread quickly through Athens. Jesse Harper's family were relieved that the murderer had been caught, but heartbroken to learn it was someone Jesse had trusted and loved. The community, too, was shaken by the revelation that Jess Owens, a seemingly gentle and kind woman, could commit such a violent act. As Jess was led away in handcuffs, she seemed to accept her fate. The police had uncovered the truth, and justice for Jesse Harper was now within reach. The arrest of Jess Owens marked a significant step in the case, bringing closure to Jesse's grieving family and friends. The trial of Jess Owens began on October 15, 2010, in Athens, Georgia. The courtroom was packed with media, friends, and family, all eager to see justice served for Jesse Harper. The prosecutor, Lisa Bennett, was a determined 45-year-old with a reputation for being tough on crime. She opened the case by presenting the evidence against Jess, including the forensic report and the silk scarf used to strangle Jesse. Lisa argued that Jess's jealousy and desperation led her to commit the murder. The defense attorney, Laird Stevens, a 50-year-old known for his calm and collected demeanor, argued that Jess Owens had acted in a moment of emotional turmoil and did not intend to kill Jesse. He emphasized Jess's emotional instability and tried to paint her as a victim of her own feelings. He called on character witnesses to testify about Jess's generally kind and gentle nature, hoping to elicit sympathy from the jury. Throughout the trial, Jesse Harper's family sat in the front row, visibly emotional. Her mother, Carol Harper, often clutched a photo of Jesse, tears streaming down her face. The trial brought back painful memories for them, but they remained hopeful that justice would be served. The jury deliberated for 3 days, carefully considering all the evidence and arguments. On October 25, 2010, they reached a verdict. The courtroom was silent as the jury foreman stood up and announced the decision. Jess Owens was found guilty of second-degree murder. The verdict brought a mix of relief and sadness to Jesse's family. They were glad that justice had been served, but were also deeply saddened by the tragic circumstances. The judge sentenced Jess Owens to 25 years in prison. As the sentence was read, Jess showed little emotion. She seemed resigned to her fate, understanding that her actions had irreversible consequences. The severity of the sentence was seen as appropriate by many, given the premeditated nature of the crime. The media covered the trial extensively, with local news stations like LUSB TV and newspapers like the Athens Banner Herald reporting on every detail. The public reaction was mixed. Some felt the sentence was just, while others believed it was too lenient, considering the loss of Jesse Harper's life. The trial and its outcome had a profound impact on all those involved. For Jesse's family, it marked the end of a painful chapter, but the loss they felt was permanent. The community of Athens was left to grapple with the reality that such a tragic event could occur in their town. After the trial of Jess Owens, light slowly began to move on for everyone involved, but the impact of Jesse Harper's murder was lasting. Jesse's family, particularly her mother, struggled with the grief of losing their vibrant daughter. Dan Harper, Jesse's husband, faced a different kind of aftermath. He had lost not only his wife, but also his reputation was tainted by the scandal of the love triangle. Dan, who had been a respected retired photography professor, decided to move to a smaller town in North Georgia to start anew. He spent his days focusing on his health and his passion for photography, hoping to find peace in his work. Jess Owens began serving her 25-year sentence at the Pulaski State Prison. She enrolled in educational programs and sought therapy to address her emotional issues. Jess's time in prison was marked by self-reflection and an effort to understand the depth of her actions and their consequences. She often expressed remorse for what she had done, writing letters to Jesse's family in hopes of finding some form of redemption. The Athens community was also affected by the murder and the trial. Local businesses, including the Starbucks where Jesse and Jess had worked, held a memorial for Jesse. Friends and coworkers gathered to share memories and honor her life. The case had brought the community closer, reminding everyone of the importance of supporting one another in times of tragedy. Maximo Lorona Rodriguez, once a suspect, faced his own legal battles unrelated to Jesse's murder. He continued to be involved in gang-related activities and was eventually convicted for his previous crimes. His life took a different path, but the investigation into Jesse's murder had brought his violent past into the spotlight. Life after the trial was about healing and finding ways to move forward for all those touched by Jesse Harper's tragic death. The community of Athens, along with Jesse's friends and family, worked to honor her memory and support each other through the lasting pain of their loss.